Hi, I'm Xander Lucas. Welcome to the XLBrief. When you think of a bodyguard, what comes to mind? Is it the big guy in a black suit shadowing a pop star or famous actor? Or maybe it's the polished image of a Royal Protection Officer standing beside King Charles, calm, watchful, unflinching. For me, two images have always stood out. The first in Dallas in 1963. Secret Service agent Clint Hill sprinting towards the presidential limo in Daley Plaza moments after President Kennedy was shot. Pure instinct, zero hesitation. The second, Tim McCarthy, another Secret Service agent, spreading himself wide outside the Washington Hilton Hotel in 1981, taking a bullet meant for President Reagan. That's the world of close protection. It's mysterious, high pressure, and often misunderstood. It's a profession where calm is weaponized, danger is calculated, and hesitation can be fatal. Today we're diving into that world with one of its foremost experts. Lucas Atkins, a former AFP close protection officer, Lucas served on the protection details for Prime Ministers Julia Gillard and Kevin Rudd, as well as other global figures like the Dalai Lama. But it was an incident on Australia Day in 2012 that threw him into the unwanted spotlight, when protesters threatened the safety of Prime Minister Gillard and Lucas was forced to evacuate her through a violent crowd. That now famous photo of Lucas shielding the PM as he rushed her to safety went viral around the world. In our chat today, we talk about what it takes to live in the mindset, the discipline, the sacrifice, and the absolute trust it demands. We break down his time in the AFP protection world and analyse recent high-profile incidents, the attempted assassination of the Slovakian Prime Minister, the shooting of Donald Trump at a Pennsylvania rally, and the assassination of Charlie Kirk in Utah. It's times like these there are plenty of keyboard warriors and armchair experts. I want to hear it from a professional, someone who's been there, done it, and lived to tell the tale. I'm really looking forward to this one. Now joining me from his home in Southeast Asia, Lucas Atkins. Welcome to the XLBrief.
Thank you, mate. Thank you very much for having me. It's been a long time coming, but we got there in the end.
Mate, it has been. I think I've only done a handful of podcasts, but I tell you, the back and forth with you has almost been a podcast in itself. Between the messages on Instagram and on Signal, trying to organise this, but we're here now. I'm really happy because I've been very much looking forward to talking to you. And I can say that because it was about 1993 I went to the movies and I saw this little movie with Clint Eastwood called In the Line of Fire. And a great movie about Clint Eastwood playing a Secret Service agent. And from that point in time, I think I've had this secret obsession with the world of close protection. So to have someone like yourself, one of its foremost experts, talking to me today, I'm really, really excited.
I'm excited too, mate. It's always a real pleasure to be able to talk about something that, and we'll probably get into it later, but talking about something that I've spent so many years trying to avoid, but really, really is my true passion. So it's a really good opportunity to come onto a podcast, have a conversation with you. I know close protection's your passion as well, but to actually go through some technical aspects of it, that's the really interesting part that I'm excited about today.
Well, I first heard your story on our friend Matty Morris's podcast, Zero Limits. And I think at that stage of that podcast, the attempt on Donald Trump had taken place because you spoke about that briefly. We are going to get to that. But first of all, I want to get to know you a bit better. I want the audience to get to know you a bit better. So tell me, where'd you grow up? What sports did you play? And what led you down the path of policing?
Okay, where did I grow up? So I lived. So I was born in Orange in New South Wales. My dad was in the Navy when I was just a little bit before I was born, and then he finished in the Navy, and then became started sweeping the floors at a Woolworths, and then managed to work his way up to become the manager of a Woolworths. And they said to him, though, it's almost like Woolworths is very similar to policing in the military. Look, if you want the promotion, we're going to have to send you to Orange. And Orange back in those days, we're talking 1979, 1980 was a really, really country location. So we moved there. I was born in Orange, spent a few years there, and then we moved back to Melbourne. So I spent kind of I don't really want to say formative years because I believe my formative years were kind of the kind of tail end of my teens. But my early years up until the age of 14 was actually in Melbourne, and a lot of people probably know Frankston or Frankganistan as we used to call it.
Funky town. I was stationed there as a policeman, so I know all about it, mate. I was in the transit crew at Frankston.
Nice, mate. Yeah. I had an uncle that was a bit of an undercover or plainclothes copper in Frankston back in the early 80s when it was the Badlands, and had some really good stories to tell.
It's a wild place, Frankston, mate, because you've got the north of Frankston, which is just, the real rough area, and then you've got the CBD, and then you've got South Frankston with $3 million homes. So it's a real clash of cultures in that place, mate, I tell you what.
Yeah, it really is, mate. Yeah, and we lived Strathfield Say was where we lived, and they stood up a new primary school there. So I was kind of like the inaugural year 3 of that primary school. So it was kind of a new suburb, but haven't been back for a long time. But at about the age of 14, mum and dad called it quits, and then mum packed us up and moved us to Sydney. And one of her biggest reasons that she moved us to Sydney is that I've always had an intense personality, and I was one of those boys that just could not sit still. I used to climb trees. I really liked heights as a kid. So I remember my mum, she'd be trying to find me, and the first place she'd look was the roof of a house or up really high up in a tree. And so she realised, I suppose when my dad left, my mum kind of realised, because I didn't have that strong male influence in my life, that she planned to move us to Sydney to be closer to her father, my grandfather, who was an old kind of woe one in the army. He was a World War II vet, a little bit of a stronger personality to try and shape me in those earlier years. So we packed up everything when I was about 14 and moved to Sydney. And if you've ever seen the movie Dangerous Minds with Michelle Pfeiffer, so I went from a school, I went from Mount Erin Secondary College in Frankston, to Sarah Redfern High School in Minto in southwestern Sydney. And I turned up on the very first day, new kid, year 8, turned up, full school uniform, and nobody was wearing a school uniform. And it was literally a scene out of Dangerous Minds. I could not believe the kind of, I suppose, the contrast of where I'd come from in Melbourne to the school I went to in southwestern Sydney. So I suppose going later on into when we talk about my policing career, one of the things they asked me early on was, how are you with dealing with violence? And one of my first things that came to my mind was, well, I went to Sarah Redfern High School in Minto, so policing's got to be arrest, right?
And I grew up in Frankston, so I'm pretty much going to be chief commissioner by the end of the week.
That's it. Yep.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that you're a high intensity kid and always climbing trees. I think I said this on another podcast. If they actually tested police and military for ADHD and autism, I think it'd be off the scale.
100%, mate. And that's a lot. I suppose that's what a lot of people say, right? You're either joining the military or the police, or you're probably ending up in jail. It just depends on who shapes you early in life.
Exactly, mate. Yeah, couldn't agree with you more. So you grew up in Melbourne. So was there an AFL influence or?
100%, mate. So I started AFL football. Well, before I started playing AFL football, there's a photo of me standing on my dad's dad, so my grandfather from my dad's side of the family, standing on his driveway with a garden gnome in my hands at the age of 3 years old, with the AFL's best colours, the black and white, the Collingwood Magpies, standing there. So I've been a fan.
Oh, God.
Yeah, and would you believe, mate, I'm a Collingwood fan. I've still got all of my teeth, but I do still have the moccasin slippers in the cupboard. Yeah.
Well, mate, I expect to see them. I don't expect to see them you wearing them where you're currently living, but then that's a different story. So, mate, you've grown up in a some would say questionable environment in some rough areas. So, what drew you down the path of policing?
Well, mate, if you'd have asked me this kind of pre-2012, if you'd have asked me this, the answer that I would have given you would have been, I wanted to join the army or the police. My entire life, I was obsessed. When I was a young kid, there's not one photo of me not wearing something green, army related. I used to walk around with a plastic toy rifle in my hand and a secondary in my pocket as a kid. I remember getting in trouble in school when I was about 9 or 10 years old for digging shell scrapes in the forest of the school when we were out on recess and lunchtime, and building bunkers. And those formative years, growing up in the 80s and the early 90s, watching all of your Rambos and your Van Damme and all those kind of, nowadays they'll term it as toxic masculinity, but back then it was what every single boy wanted to aspire to be.
It's what we all did.
Yeah. And so if you'd asked me pre-2012, I would have said to you that it was becoming a police officer was not something that I became when I joined the AFP college in 2006. It was something that I always was, but it was confirmed when I graduated the AFP college in 2006. Now, post 2012, when I've done a lot of introspection on myself and a lot of self work and self healing, I would actually say that probably one of the biggest reasons I was drawn to policing, and I know we'll go into it in detail, but later a close protection officer, is because my dad left my mum when I was 12 years old. And I think what happened with that subconsciously is I took on the role of the protector of the family. And my mum was a little bit of a nervous person, suffered from anxiety. She also had to work 2 jobs to put food on the table. We were dirt poor. And so I think what happened in those very early stages of my life, I actually subconsciously developed and built those neural pathways to be a protector. And then, without going too much down the hippie path of this discovery, fast forward, 10 years later, I'm in the height of my trying to escape being a close protection officer. So I go and do yoga teacher training. And the yoga teacher training was in 3 modules. I did a couple of modules in Bondi with Power Living Australia, a guy named Duncan Peake, who was an ex-3RAR paratrooper. So perfect yoga teacher for me. And I think he liked having me there as opposed to the kind of stereotypical usual student that he would have. But in the middle of the modules, we did an 8-day retreat in Bali as part of the yoga teacher training. And there was 80 people there, 3 guys, 77 women, all on this retreat to become yoga teachers. And every day we're meditating and we're doing yoga and we're doing all of this deep internal work to try and work out our triggers and all of this stuff. And by about day 7, I'm looking around the studio every day and there's all these, women and men crying and having these amazing breakthroughs. And this is the best experience of my life. And I'm not feeling anything. And I said to Duncan, to my yoga teacher, I said, mate, are they just full of shit? Is this just one of those things that you're meant to say when you go on yoga teacher training that, oh my God, it was a life-changing experience and, blah, blah, blah. And he said, look, just stick with it and just enjoy the process. And when I let go on about day 8, we were meditating in the morning and you would find this hard to believe with my intense personality, but I find meditation excruciating. I'd rather do 100 burpees than sit and meditate for 30 minutes. But I'm sitting there and this thing just hit me like a lightning bolt. And it made me realize that the reason why I was drawn to policing was that neural pathway that was built of protecting my mother and my sister. And what I actually did, to go a little bit deeper into it, it wasn't just that. When you go into the deeper layers, it was actually a little bit of a fear of confrontation that when I was at that very young age, the only male in the household with my mum and my sister, they were both acting vulnerable every day. I was very, very deep down, buried deep in my subconscious, I was actually scared that I wasn't strong enough or good enough to protect them. So what did I do? I built myself into a human weapon system. I joined the police. I trained every day. I ended up becoming a close protection officer. And not only did I build myself into a human weapon system, I ended up the primary protection officer for the Prime Minister of Australia, all because deep, deep down, I probably had a fear of confrontation and a deep-seated insecurity that I wasn't good enough. And that happened on day 8 of the course. And then day 9 of the course, what was I doing? Running around the yoga shala with the other 79 participants with a Power Living shirt on going, oh my God, this has been a life-changing experience. It's the best thing that's ever happened to me. And, and singing the loudest and dancing the loudest. So very, very long answer to your question, mate. But I think as we get older and we start to have a look deeper into ourselves, identifying those triggers is really, really useful, because then you can actually draw from or you can actually identify where you draw your rocket fuel for success. And if the rocket fuel is something negative and toxic like that, as Chris Williamson says, no problems. Use it until you achieve escape velocity. But then when you achieve escape velocity and you're sitting back at a point where you're successful, then start to reverse engineer it and go, well, it's probably not the best rocket fuel for me to be using. I identify it's there. I know when I'm being triggered. But what I'm going to do as I move forward is be a lot more conscious of it. And when I'm conscious of it, I'm not going to be triggered out of context that when I'm walking down the road and a 6'6" roided up monster walks past me, I'm not going to want to fight him because I need to prove that I'm good enough. I'm going to go, oh, that's interesting. Why do I feel that way? Because there's an insecurity there. It's not I'm insecure. It's there's an insecurity there. And when you depersonalize the language, you can work through it. So that's the really, really I suppose, the long roundabout way of answering your question on why I actually believe I was drawn to policing. That, and it's just in the fabric of my DNA, mate. It's the same as you and a lot of other people in our community. Even now, there was a time about a year ago, I was on holidays in Thailand, and I looked down and there's a guy that's drowned in the pool, and the staff are down there slapping his face. And I didn't even hesitate. I went down and sorted him out, called an ambulance. Long story short, he survived. And when I was telling one of my mates about it, he said, "Why the hell did you do that? You absolutely exposed yourself. You're in a foreign country. You're medically working on someone. What happened if he came back? What happens if any of your interventions caused him to be even more injured and he came back and sued you or you're arrested?" And I'm like, that thought never even crossed my mind. And it's just
Instinct.
in our DNA, mate. We act when other people don't.
Yeah, exactly right. It's funny you should say that about, the way soldiers, airmen, sailors, cops are wired. I think there's always been that little bit of internal conflict in our mind why we join. I think we've always been the people that looked after the kids that got bullied. We were never the bullies. We were always the kids that got, looked after the bullies. We're always that protector. I relate to that answer a lot. So that was a roundabout answer, but that was a very good answer. So I appreciate it. So, mate, you've decided to join the police. You end up in the AFP over, I'm assuming you probably applied for a couple of police forces, state police forces, or how did you end up at the AFP? And what was that journey like?
Yeah, so mate, I hedged my bets. I applied for New South Wales Police and AFP at the same time. I got into both. I'd like to give you some amazing answer as to why I joined the AFP, but the truth is it's because they paid you when you were in training, because I joined when I was 26.
Yep.
New South Wales Police is probably the same or maybe different now, who knows, but back then it was after the Royal Commission, it was all changed into this kind of, dressed up Charles Sturt University TAFE where you could apply for Oz study. I think it was $240 a fortnight, and at that stage I was 26. I'd grown up dirt poor, I had bills, so I chose the AFP for two reasons. They paid at the college, but also because I liked the idea of having the ability to work not only Australia-wide, but I knew AFP had deployments overseas and an international network as well. Yeah.
Mate, so you've chosen the AFP. They do pay the New South Wales police recruits now. That's only been something that's come, but they still end up with a HECS debt. Go figure. Anyway, I digress. Government thinking, I don't get it, mate. But tell me about life at the college when you first arrived. You're an intense guy. How was life going into that disciplined environment?
Mate, I've talked about this a little bit before on other podcasts, but I was expecting, and I don't go into it too much because it was 5 minutes of my life and it was late 90s, but I did do a little bit of Army Reserve service in the late 90s, and my experience from that, I thought that's what the AFP college was going to be like. I drove from Sydney to Canberra. There was no kind of Google Maps readily available back then, so I had the old street directory out, the Melways, if you're from Melbourne. I think it's the Gregory's from Sydney. And I remember I stopped at McDonald's at Barton or McDonald's at Manuka first, loaded myself up full of calories and food because I thought I don't know when my next meal is going to come from. I turned up, I was dressed in a button-up shirt, nice slacks, leather shoes, freshly shaven. Ma'am, I'm here to report for college. Well, calm down, buddy. Here's your key and let's take you on a tour and check you in. And I'm thinking, check me in. Okay, maybe they're just trying to soften me up before the blow comes. And it kind of never came. It was 26 weeks of the college. Yes, it was intense. It was cognitively intense. And obviously my favourite part, not to stereotype myself, was the operational safety training module where it was all of the, shooting and electrocuting and spraying and everything else and fighting and baton striking and, like most of us enjoy. But I found on about day 3 of my time at the college, I got in trouble for something that I don't really believe I should have been in trouble for. And it was something so silly. We were just sitting around in the dining area having lunch or dinner or something at the time and, doing what recruits do, especially you're joining the cops. Everyone's, F and C's and swearing their minds out. And there was no one else in there, so we were fine. Later on, one of their fellow recruits on our course that was older than us at the time, I think he was in his early 40s, goes and makes a complaint to the program manager saying that if we'd have been using that language and women and children were present in the dining room, they would have been highly offended. And next thing, I'm getting a dressing down from the project manager and some station sergeant saying that if I don't, I'm not going to make the college. And because of my 5 minutes in the military and me growing up as with a strong grandfather presence, I kind of just took it. But afterwards I thought, but it was out of context. There was no one, if there was women and children present or other people present, we wouldn't have been swearing our brains off, but we were just decompressing. So that put a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. And then this one station sergeant, he wasn't there a lot, but he'd come for when we used to have parades back then, so we had Wednesday parades and stuff. And he just rode me for the whole 26 weeks. Every time he saw me, he'd dress me down and he'd scream in front of my face and he'd say to me I wasn't going to make it. And it got to the point where I said to myself, I don't really like failing. I've probably got a fear of failing. So I thought, I'll graduate the college, I'll get the badge in my pocket, and then I'll resign because at least then I passed, So that's what got me through the 26 weeks. A lot of people say that it was the best time of their career. It was not the best time of my career. I was counting down the days to the point where it was 3 weeks and 4 days, 3 weeks and 3 days, 3 weeks and 2 days. And back then, if we had nothing on the weekends, we could get out of Canberra for the weekend. So I was in my car, 110 k's an hour, back to Sydney every single weekend. I just wanted to get out of the place. And then when I graduated the college, I said to myself, well, I got through that. I managed to look the station sergeant in the eyes and go, well, you didn't beat me. And it wasn't something out of the movies where he was doing it to motivate me because he saw something in me. He was just a piece of shit. And if I saw it this day, I'd go, well, fuck you, mate. It wasn't motivation. I don't know why he drilled into me and targeted me when I was probably performing slightly above average with the academic stuff. But as far as the physical stuff and the weapons drills and the baton and spray and everything, I was definitely top 5 of my class and motivated. And I don't know why, but I got the badge in my pocket and then I said to myself, you know what, I'll do the 13 months probation. And it's so funny saying it now all these years later, but I thought to myself, I'll do the 13 months probation. That'll give me enough credibility to then resign. At least I'll have it on my CV. And, fast forward 12 years later, I did 12 years in the job and then got out.
Well, mate, the copper, your squad mate that made the complaint, where's he now?
He's out of the job now, but he ended up...
I thought he might be the deputy commissioner by that stage.
Well, yes, exactly. Showing that kind of leadership promise early, mate.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Wow. Okay. How about don't be a rat, mate? Come on. You're meant to be teammates, for God's sake. It drives me nuts. So you graduate from the AFP college, even though the station sergeant was giving you a hard time. Where's your first posting?
So I was a national recruit. So our course at the recruit college was split in half. So it was Melbourne and Sydney. So I went to Sydney office. So finished the AFP college, 26 weeks. And then I went up to deployed to Sydney office, where you do your first week of kind of local procedures training. And then in a perfect world, what they do is they give you 3-month rotations of different areas in that command, in that Sydney office, so that you get a bit of a broad brush experience of being a federal agent and a federal investigator. And then after that, your name goes to a horse traders meeting. Now, what happened to me, my first post was Sydney Airport. This is pre-airport uniform policing. So back in those days, we had AFP protective service officers as, I suppose, the kind of muscle at the airport. Yep. And then you had a couple of AFP response teams of federal agents that would get a call if there was a drug import, a dead person on a plane, or something occurring that required police intervention at the airport. Now, that was meant to be a 3-month rotation, but APEC 07 happened. And I ended up doing 9 months at the airport. They kind of paused all the rotations. Yeah.
Oh, God. And was there anything exciting happening in the 9 months at the airport? I mean,
mate, probably the highlight of my 9 months at the airport. Number one, I've got a great photo of Krispy Kreme just outside the domestic terminal, filled with New South Wales police motorbikes and marked police cars. So I think that's probably the highlight of my time. But it was actually a really good introduction, because most of the federal agents that go to a regional office like Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, Adelaide, they don't really get exposure to community policing. They get exposure to policing from behind a computer. And every time they probably could go out and engage with the community, there's a dedicated team for that in national investigations. So I got in trouble once because I went and had a conversation with an Australia Post manager, because there's an Australia Post liaison team in the AFP that you should go to. Now, what I managed to avoid by doing my first 9 months at Sydney Airport is I almost got, and the state coppers out there are going to really hate me for saying this, but I got a small glimpse into community policing in the microcosm of an airport environment, because Sydney Airport's a little city in itself. So we were still doing things like, drunk drivers, brawls in the terminal where we had to go hands-on, from that right through to going to have to give a death notice to someone because, a lot of people die on long-haul flights and they land in Sydney and some dude's just dead in the seat. Then we'd have to go through that, call forensics, and then I'd go out with maybe a sergeant and we'd have to actually deliver the death notice to the family in Sydney. From that right through to drug import, so internal narcotics couriers with 80 to 100 balloons of cocaine or heroin inside them. And
insanity. I don't know why anyone does that.
Yeah. And back then it was probably a little bit different to now, but back then customs would refer it to us. We'd get the suspicion transferred to us. We'd take them to the hospital and get the CT scan. And if they went positive, we'd have to set up a roster with federal agents, look after them 24 hours a day until they cleared all of the narcotics. And then we would go and book them and send them off to remand. So yeah, it was an interesting it was an interesting kind of introduction to policing and to federal policing there, where you're literally just sitting in Customs House in the office, and the second that bat phone rings, something's coming down the line that you've got to go and think fast and deal with. And it could be a 2 kilo heroin import, or it could be a bunch of drunk diggers at the bar punching on with a bunch of taxi drivers. You just never know.
that would never happen with diggers. What are you talking about? Don't say things like that. Yeah. So when did protection first pop up on your radar? Because it's something that's quite specialised, and I mean, there is a bit of a mysterious image around the job. So when did it first pop up on your radar, and when did you think, oh, I'd like to give that a crack?
There was probably two streams. So I wanted to be, when I was going through the recruitment process for the AFP, I kind of wanted to be a tactical operator. Now, I was recruited to the AFP as a federal investigator, and I remember on my panel interview, there was one sergeant on the panel interview that was trying to get it out of me that I wanted to be a tactical operator. And I had to kind of lie to get into the AFP. So I was, oh, no, I'm not interested in that. And he's like, you're a door kicker. I can see you from 100 miles away, mate. No. I absolutely love the idea of lots of paperwork and 6 to 9 months of building a brief on someone for half a day of adrenaline, then another 12 months in court to where they get off. I love the idea of that. So I kind of wanted to be a tactical operator. But the close protection thing, same as you, in the line of fire, Kevin Costner, the bodyguard. And I remember there was one scene in the movie of The Bodyguard that stuck with me and then, funnily enough, became true later in life when I became a contractor, when he goes back to see one of his buddies in the Secret Service, and his buddy says to him, "The money's good, isn't it?" He's like, oh, and he's like, no, I know the money's good in the private sector, and that always kind of stuck with me. So I started training for, back then it was SRS for the Australian Capital Territory. That was the kind of police tactical group for ACT. Yep. And it was, I want to say it was ORT, Operational Response Team, for the kind of national PTG capability for the AFP. I know I'm trying not to use a lot of acronyms, TLAs, 3-letter acronyms, but I'll try not to. But so I started training in the college for that. And then the second I deployed to Sydney office, I continued my training for selection. And then one of these funny things happens when you're part of a big organisation. I spent 6 months right before there was the kind of pre-selection for SRS in Canberra. I spent 6 months training, pack marching, stomping, chin-ups, push-ups, all of that stuff. And a lot of the guys out there will be able to relate. You're training to the point of I'm either going to make it or I'm going to get injured. You're trying to just keep that 2 or 3 millimeters just shy of injury to get yourself to that high standard. So I train up, get ready to go, put my application in for the first part of the selection back then, and I wasn't released from Sydney office. They said due to operational requirements, they couldn't release me for selection, so I needed to stay as an investigator. And at the time, I was so shocked. And I remember going to have a meeting with the commander of Sydney office, and I said to him, "Sir, do you understand the level that I've had to train and the sacrifices I've had to make the last 6 months to get ready? I'm ready to go. What about if you just release me for selection, and then if I pass, at least I get the tick in the box. I'm merit listed for 12 months. I'll come back to Sydney office. I'll be a good little federal investigator until I can get my release." And he said no. So then I requested through my team leader at the time to take recreation leave. And I said, I'll go and do it on my holiday time and I'll do the selection. Then they came back and said, you can't do that. You're not covered by Comcare if you get injured.
For God's sake.
So I fought and I fought and I fought. And in the end, I couldn't go. So I went back to being a good little federal investigator for the next 6-12 months. Then when another selection the next year came up, I trained up again for 6 months. Same thing, wasn't released. Sydney office is too busy. You can't go for selection. Then I saw a buddy of mine that I went through recruits with on another team. He did a little trick, which I'm now obviously intimately aware of, and I know you'd be as well, being in the job. He waited until someone he knew was acting sergeant, and he managed to get released for a CPP course. So I went, now it's time to strike. So I was in a bit of a part-time tactical team in Sydney office. Back then it was called the Advanced Specialist Support Group. Now I think it's called this Specialist Support Team, just like a part-time bunch of investigators that are trained for like those medium risk kind of warrants that still go in with longs or with pistols or whatever. I was doing that, and one of my TLs on there, back then it was a bit of a brotherhood, and then he was an acting superintendent. The time he was an acting superintendent, there was no selections for a PTG, but there was selections for close protection training. So I wrote up my application, put it through him. He approved it. I ended up on the course, and halfway through the course, I got a phone call from the substantive saying, how dare you? And, sorry, sir, the connection's really bad, but I guess I'm here now. Your career will be destroyed. Well, my career is either in PTG or close protection, sir. So, yeah, thank you for your advice, click. And that's how I ended up on the CPP course.
Well, mate, you got to do what you got to do. You got to protect your own career. You've got to get around those sergeants. I've seen it plenty of times, both in the military and in policing, where people won't get released for something, like you said, they've been training for. The sergeant won't release them because they're too busy, and they've had to do things like that. Rec leave, get it through an acting sergeant, get it through one of the more friendly sergeants, wait till the senior sergeant was there, slip through the paperwork. You got to do what you got to do, mate. That's perfect.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Mate, so tell me, you're on the CPP course. Tell me about that. I mean, I want to know the level of training it is. What was the hardest part, physically, mentally? The type of things you go through that you can tell me about, without breaking any security barriers there. And how did you find it? How long was it? Tell me everything.
Yeah, so mate, the course was 6 weeks. Now, like I kind of mentioned, when I was in recruits and then when I first went to Sydney office, I didn't really feel like I was the AFP. I felt like I hadn't really clicked. I had my kind of team of people that I was tight with operationally, and we all worked together. But I looked at how they were just taking to the AFP like fish to water, and I didn't feel the same. I didn't feel like I clicked with investigations. I had that sergeant riding me the entire time I was at the recruit college. And it was constantly in my mind that I wanted to leave. Fast forward day one of the CPP course, which I was still at the time a little bit starry-eyed that I'd been selected for it. I'd only been a copper, I think, that time for about 3.5 years. And I vividly remember sitting down on morning one in the classroom, and the second they started the introduction presentation, it was like I was putting on a comfortable pair of slippers. Something clicked in me, and I just felt like this
I'm home.
Yeah, and it wasn't like, I think this is going to be good for me. It was, wow, I've found something that is literally my DNA. And that was the entire close protection program. It was 6 weeks. It was very stressful. And I know when we talk about the difference between cognitive load and physical load on a program like that, there was a lot of, and I can't talk to what it is exactly like now, but back then, this is kind of 2009, circa 2009. There was a high physicality to it. We still had to train physically to a high level, but the cognitive load and the simulated fatigue that they put you under was very intense and very difficult. And they did it with good reason, because when you're an operational close protection officer, you might be doing 16 to 20-hour days for as many days as it takes if you're offshore. And you can't just drop everything in a heap and go, well, I'm tired, I need to go and have a rest, and I'm hungry and thirsty. It's so they prepared us really, really well. So day one, I remember sitting in the classroom feeling like it was meant to be for me. And the other thing I looked at is the 4 instructors that walked into the room carried themselves differently from anyone I'd come across in the AFP previously. The way they were dressed, the way that they spoke, they were dressed like tactical operators. They had the tactical tactical tuxedo, cargo pants, and the blue polo shirt with AFP close protection training on it. But the way that they looked like hitters, but they were polished. And that always stuck with me. And it's really funny to say, day one of a 6-week CPP course, the other 14 or 15 candidates in the room were probably just thinking, man, I really, really hope I get through this. My first thought was looking at those instructors going, I want to be you one day. I really, really want to be that. And that was the 6-week program. You start off with the kind of normal stuff. So you go through usually driving first. Driving is one of the highest risk for failure for a participant because you are driving not only, so you've got to do motorcade driving and emergency reactions to attack driving, 2 components. So with your motorcading driving, you've obviously got to be really, really smooth. You're either driving the protectee, and that's the nice polished bubble of tranquility where you squeeze ease with the brakes and everything's lovely around the world. And then you've got to flick that switch and drive the security car behind where you're the bubble of tactical aggression, and you're basically providing or facilitating movement for that VIP vehicle to be nice and polished, but you're at the back with the music playing. There's probably a dude eating a kebab in the back. You might have a statey with you if you're deployed domestically, and you're moving through space like that. Then you get to the emergency action drills and the reactions to attack, and you might be driving at 80 kilometers an hour. All of a sudden, you come around a corner, there's a barricade across the road, it's threat front and threat right. You've got to slam on the brakes, reverse out while you're under fire, and there's stun grenades and smoke going off and paintball rounds hitting the car on 2 sides. And you've got to be able to transition lanes, reverse at 70 kilometers an hour, and then do a nice in-concert Y-turn. Whether you're in the P car or the security car, you've got to turn in concert together and then bug out of there and then get to your designated safe harbour or your safe haven or safe location. So the driving is usually the highest failure point. So you get through that, the first part of the course, and then once you get through that part, that's your first gateway ticked and you continue on. Then you go into shooting. So then shooting is being able to apply your Glock pistol surgically while dealing with a struggling, untrained VIP behind you, and being able to deliver that weapon, usually in low light, from a concealed jacket. We've got a whole bunch of different carriage systems. So back then we used to have shoulder holsters. We'd have a tack bag or a bum bag, very 80s, but that came back in fashion now. Then you'd have your normal belt rigs and all of your kind of accoutrements. So you go through that. Then you move into your operational safety training aspect of it. So you've still got all of your standard police OST stuff, but then you've obviously got
baton, taser, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and maybe you might have a standard police officer might carry a larger can of OC spray, and in CPP you might have a plainclothes smaller one, and a little bit more soft hands and hard-handed tactics in close protection as well. So yeah, all of that stuff, and then that's all of the ticks in the box. And so the first kind of 4 weeks of the program is learning things in compartments, so learning things in silos. Then you go through to week 5 and 6 of the program where you need to start drawing all of those compartments into one big operating system and a whole bunch of tools in your toolbox that you can immediately draw in any environment and think fast. And I know I said at the start that driving's the biggest failure point, but later on down the track when I did become the head of close protection training and a specialist trainer with the AFP, I found that usually the 5 and 6 is the hardest part of the program. You've weeded out all of the other ones for the first 4 weeks with the technical skills, but week 5 and 6, being able to draw anything that you need immediately from your skill set based off what the environment in front of you presenting is a real skill. And I've seen men and women that have been the highest spec tactical operators and investigators and really, really high-speed people go onto close protection courses, and they just can't turn off that 1% of themselves to be able to say to a role-playing prime minister, "Oh, just a second, ma'am. It's the red man. We'll just wait for the green man, then we'll cross the road." You usually get the kind of the hitters or the high performers that would, grab the role-playing VIP in the chest and say, "Hold, wait, move."
Well, that was a question I had for you. So, I mean, obviously being trained as a AFP close protection agent, you need to be able to shoot, you need to be able to drive, you need to be able to be physical. It seems to me you almost need to send some of these people to finishing school.
Yeah. And funnily enough, mate, back when we did my course, we actually went and did formal training at Government House with the protocol team there as one of the components of the course. So we
Is
sat
that
down
right?
and learned how to, eat at a formal dinner. And instead of
Right.
saying, hey, lads, I'm just going to go and have a piss, having to turn around and say, pardon me, I'd like to go for a comfort break. I shall be back shortly, that type of stuff.
A
But yeah, it
comfort break.
really is. And later on in my life, and I know we'll talk about what I'm doing now, but I've realized that close protection training is a lot of people out there default to what's easy and what's sexy, which is the shooting, driving, the tasering, all of the tactical stuff. But if you're having a look at the close protection operating environment, and if you're having a look at it like you're writing a risk assessment, what's the highest variable of something that you're going to use day to day in close protection? It's probably not double tapping someone in the chest. It's probably not reversing out at 80 kilometers an hour and doing a beautiful J turn while you take a quick selfie for Snapchat for later on in your private life or whatever else. It's probably going to be the communication piece, the courageous conversation, the wrapping a dog shit sandwich and making it look like it's something that they want to actually consume. And that's what it is. It's all about the polish and communication. And I've said it before. Close protection's like you've Iron Man from the Avengers. Like you've got this nuclear reactor in your chest, but it is unseen. It sits below the skin, but it's close to the surface. And that is the stone cold tactical operator if you do need to activate it. But most of the day, you're in that nice suit and tie, your big smiles, you're developing relationships with not only the VIP, but the spouse, the family, if they have one, the staff, members of the public. And it's about that polish. That's what makes you a successful close protection officer. And you may go through your entire career, never have to draw your gun, never have to drag a prime minister out of a lethal threat. But what you will have to do every day is build those relationships with not only the protectee, but with their circles of social influence as well.
Well, at the end of the day, you're representing the Prime Minister, you're representing the Governor General. So if you're sitting at a formal dinner table and you don't know which knife and fork to use when the second course comes out, that could be quite embarrassing for your said protectee. So, mate, I'm glad they put you through that. So, you finished the course. How many people made it through?
I want to say back then, other than when I ran training, but I'm a little bit biased, but the peak of close protection training at that stage in the previous 10 to 15 years was around that 2008 to 2012 era where they had a full-time close protection team, a very, very good group of trainers. And other than, like I said, I was biased, but other than when I was running close protection training, it was the closest to delivering turnkey close protection officers we'd ever seen in the AFP.
Right.
It was the quality of the training and everything was amazing. Yeah, am I answering your question with that, or have I missed a part of it?
And well, I was going to follow up with that. So the level of training that Australians get in the AFP as a close protection agent, where does it sit on the global rank? Because we all know of the Secret Service, we all know of the Royal Protection Squad. Where's the AFP stack up?
So, especially when I was looking after when I was on the Prime Minister's close protection team, you obviously travel the world the same as if you would just be going Sydney to Melbourne, but you're going to Sydney and to wherever on planet Earth every single week, every single month. And in most of those things, you're going to Apex, G20s, CHOGMs, Pacific Island forums. And what usually happens with those is you drop your boss, they go into the big plenary session or the meetings, and then you go to the security hold room. And inside that security hold room is every close protection officer from every other world economy of every other leader that's there. And you get to know them, so it's, I might see Robbo in Mexico for a G20, and then 3 months later, I'll see him in Vladivostok for a CHOGM, and then, and you get to know the teams. What I will say is, the Secret Service is probably its own beast. It's probably unique worldwide because they rely on, and we would definitely talk about it with the Donald Trump stuff, but the Secret Service is heavily reliant on massive amounts of resources. And if I can put that into perspective, I went and did a nuclear security summit in Seoul in South Korea, kind of that circa 2010, when Barack Obama was the US president and Julia Gillard was the Australian Prime Minister. And we turned up for the pre-advance. The South Korean Presidential Protection Unit and the protocol teams and everything else had rented out this big warehouse for the pre-advance meetings. We walked in for the Australian Prime Minister, and it was me and one other close protection officer for the PM. So 2 total for the AFP, for the Australian Prime Minister. And this is the pre-advance before the boss had gone wheels down.
Yep.
Next minute, double doors open, 650 Secret Service agents as the pre-advance team. So it was 2 from Australia and 650 from the US Secret Service just for the pre-advance. Now, this is a month before the event's happening. So we fly over there, we do a couple of days, we get eyes on the ground, we sort out what we're going to do, and we fly back to Australia, and they all jump on their C-17s and fly back to the States or to wherever else they're going next. So the Secret Service is unique. Going back to your original question on who does it the best, sitting in all of those security hold rooms around the world, I used to think back in when I first started, the Secret Service is the gold standard. But you know what? Everybody has the same issues worldwide. Not enough time for training, not enough resources. You've got your weapons on the team. You've got your dudes on the team that are way too old with their head in the trough and just love the travel, and they got the big gut on them. And they just, first thing they think about when they land is, where's the next buffet? I would probably say the AFP is up there. The AFP is definitely up there. We do it full-time, or they do it full-time. They do it on a whole bunch of protectees now. Back when I was in close protection, it was only the Prime Minister, the Governor General, the US Ambassador, and the Israeli Ambassador. Now they're spread thin, and they've got a whole bunch of creative applications, whether it's a security liaison officer for one person and a full CPP team for someone else. So I think we're up there. Our model was originally drawn from the kind of UK model, obviously. One capability that I saw that actually really impressed me, where they weren't resource reliant like the Secret Service, and they weren't resource depleted like the rest of us. They were sitting in the middle, and that was the Korean Presidential Security Service.
Right.
I found that they did it really, really well, and they didn't flood it they didn't overcook it with a bunch of resources, but they almost had exactly what they needed. And they operate in a space where they look out their window and they can see North Korea.
They can see North
so
Korea,
they're in a heavy current foreign intelligence service space. They're in a heavy kinetic threat space. They really impressed me. They really, really impressed me. But yeah, to answer your story, I think we're all about the same. We've all got the same struggles and the same problems.
Well, mate, let's. I thank for that. I think probably like with most Australian teams, we probably punch well above our weight class, whether it be the military, policing, protection, whatever it is. The old improvise, adapt, and overcome attitude that, Australian operators, police, whatever, have to adapt to, because we're a smaller country, smaller teams, smaller pool, but we still punch well above our weight in these situations. You've finished the close protection course and you start doing the job. And what's your first gig as a protection officer?
Yeah, so back then you finish the close protection program and you're technically not still qualified. You go and do 6 months of consolidation on an operational team. And back then you start with the foreign dignitary protection team. So I was on a team that looked after the Israeli and the US ambassador and any incoming visits to Australia from world leaders or people that require close protection. So you get a roster, and it was either I might do 3 or 4 days on the Israeli ambassador, then I might have 2 days off, do 3 days on the US, have 4 days off, and then maybe, the Dalai Lama or the Prime Minister of Malaysia is coming in, and then you look after him for that. So those were really... Now, the PM is obviously the pinnacle. The AFP tried to flatten the structure years ago and say that it was elitism to say that Prime Minister or close protection officers are the pinnacle of close protection. I think that's absolute bullshit. I think that being a Prime Minister or close protection officer is the pinnacle of close protection. But I have to say the greatest experiences I had and the greatest fun that I had was looking after the Israeli and the US ambassadors, because you don't have the big machine where you have protocol teams and you have international visits and you have the Prime Minister's office staff and a whole bunch of advisors. Sometimes when I was looking after the Israeli ambassador, it was him driving his own Tarago with me sitting in the front seat as his PPO with back then an armoured Calais sitting behind him as a security car, and he's just driving himself around Canberra. Yeah, back then that's how it used to work. We did a job once where he was friends with this mining magnate from West Australia, and he was invited out to spend 4 or 5 days on this luxury yacht sitting off Rottnest Island. So we spent 5 days 400 metres away, bobbing up and down on a West Australian water police boat, cooking bacon and eggs in the morning with all of our kit in a bum bag just on the floor of the boat, going for swims in the morning, and he was over on this luxury boat. Now the funny thing, that Israeli ambassador back at those times, his name was Yuval Rotem, and talk about intense, similar kind of personality to us. He was ADHD up the wazoo, and it was driving him insane being stuck on this boat for 4 or 5 days. And he kept waving at me and calling me over. So I jump on the rib and go over, and then he'd be all smiles and laugh to this loaded friend that he had that was hosting him on this boat. But then he'd grab me and whisper into my ear and say, "Lucas, I'm going absolutely crazy. I need you to make up an excuse to take me to Rottnest Island. I'm just going crazy on this boat." So most days we'd take him to the island and he would just walk aimlessly around. But there was this one, I debated whether I should tell this story, but I think I should because it's bloody hilarious. So there's this one time, so we first get onto the Waypole boat. We got a couple of West Australian police, water police with us, escorting us out. Then we're just living on this little boat for 4 or 5 days, and they give us the brief on day one. And they say the number one rule of this boat is don't take a shit when we're at anchor. It's a marine toilet and it will just fall out the bottom of the boat. So if you need to take a shit, we'll run you to Rottnest Island, or do it when we're moving. Okay, roger that. Cool. Then we get the rest of the brief on everything else. So about day three of this operation, and we're sitting there, and my offsider from the AFP disappears, whatever. Maybe he's gone to have a nap. We didn't have a lot to do back then. We all had these Amazon Kindles when they just come out. We're all reading ebooks, no podcasts or anything back then, really.
No.
So we're sitting around, and my mate disappears. And then I'm just, shooting the breeze with the Waypole team there. That they were really good. And then I think to myself, I might go and make a brew. You guys want a brew? Yep, no worries. So I go to the kitchen, and then the door cracks to the toilet, and my mate walks out, and the stench that followed, I'm like, oh no, mate, you just broke rule number one. And he goes, oh man, that bacon and eggs went right through me. Don't say anything. As he says, don't say anything, we hear this tap, 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 tap at the back of the boat, and we hear, yoo-hoo, and we look, and it's the Israeli ambassador and his billionaire mining magnate have swum over to the boat. No. And they're come in for a swim. And I look at my mate, he goes bright red. And I just turn to him and I go, mate, you better hope that he doesn't pop up out of that water with a Snickers bar on his shoulder.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so you broke the number one rule of the boat. Don't take a dump when you're at anchor. And, maybe don't take a shit when the Israeli ambassador's swimming around the boat.
Swimming through your poo-poo. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
That is not good. That is not good, mate. Well, that's a great story, so thank you for sharing that. I think now that you're kind of your hands are free a bit more, you can tell those types of stories, which is good.
Yeah.
Mate, how did you end up on the Prime Minister's team? Because at the time, around that, I think it was 2007 to about 2009, we had a bit of a political turmoil stage in Australia where we had Kevin Rudd, Julia Gillard, back to Kevin Rudd. It was a turbulent time in Australian politics. So did you look after Prime Minister Julia Gillard first or Kevin Rudd first?
Yeah, so I looked after Gillard when she first took over from Kevin Rudd. Yep. So when that whole kind of fracture happened, and then Gillard became the Prime Minister is when I went to the team. And I won't diverge into a massive amount, but really, really long story short, the reason why I ended up on the close protection team, because back then you used to have to do 3 to 5 years on the foreign teams before you'd even get a thought about to be on a Prime Minister. When I was on my close protection course, when we were running simulated operations, there was this moment when there was a role player, and I impressed a role player with a morning run. He was a marathon runner. He took off at speed. He lost the rest of the CPP team, and I refused to lose him. And I stayed with him for the full 60 minutes that he was running around Canberra. I was wearing 10 kilos of kit. I refused to give up. Lost everybody else. The advanced car lost us because we were babies and learning our craft, but I just knew that I wasn't going to let him beat me. At the end, we finished the exercise. I go and stumble off and vomit into a garden bed, then turn around and come back up. And he walks over to me and he says, do you know who I am? And I said, no, sir. And he said, no, Duff, exercise is over. I'm the PPO and the sergeant on Kevin Rudd's team, the Prime Minister's team. And I was quite starstruck, because back then a Prime Minister or Close Protection Officer was literally the thing that you wanted.
Yep.
And I'm just a, candidate on a CPP course. And he said, that amount of ticker and professionalism that you showed is what I want on the team. The team's getting a little bit stagnant from the whole Kevin 07. We got the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister won, or Kevin Rudd won the Prime Ministerial race. And I want to shake the team up. So when you finished your consolidation of 6 months, give me a call. You've got a spot on the team. And I just, respectfully said thank you and thought, no way. Fast forward to the end of my 6 months of looking after the Israeli and the US and all the other kind of incoming world leaders into Australia. He turns up at headquarters and he goes, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm kind of packing up, sir. I've finished my consolidation. I'm going to head back to Sydney office for a bit and then I'll work out my next moves. Maybe I'll try and get a spot in the CPP teams in Sydney. He said, oh, so you don't want a spot on the PM's team? I said, oh, apologies, sir. I thought that was just a kind of offhand remark to a recruit that impressed you. And he said, no, I meant it. You start tomorrow. And I went, oh, okay. And he goes, oh, so you don't want it? And I said, oh, no, absolutely I want it. Oh, yes, okay, cool. And in my mind, I'm thinking, be cool, don't mess this up.
Yep.
And I just kind of respectfully asked him, I said, look, all my stuff's in Sydney. Do you mind if I have a little bit of a couple of days to drive all my stuff down? So I went back to Sydney, rented a truck, drove all my stuff down. And then my first task was, he got me into Parliament House, got all of my IDs and passes and everything. And he said, right, you got to go to the airport tomorrow. For what? You're going to Lisbon. Where's Lisbon? It's in Portugal, mate. I'd suggest you learn your geography if you want to be a Prime Minister or Close Protection Officer. And then 24 hours later, mate, I was at Canberra Airport trying to find a guy that he said, yeah, you'll see him. He's got a buzz cut. He's the other sergeant. He'll take you through what you need to do. And I was on a plane to a nuclear security summit in Lisbon. And
wow.
I was a Prime Ministerial Protection Officer. Now, back then, you had to do a further 3 months consolidation to then be signed off as at a PM standard. So my first 3 months on the team, they throw everything at you. They give you all of the kind of dog's body tasks. You just smile and wave and do everything the best you can. At the end of the 3 months, they sit you down and they either give you the thumbs up, you're now a Prime Minister or CPP officer, or we're going to send you back down to the foreign dignitary floor for some further development. And luckily I grinded for those 3 months and got the tap on the shoulder and they said, congratulations, you're
amazing. That's awesome. And that was with Julia?
That was with Julia, yep.
Okay. So tell me about that time, because this has always been a thing in my mind, that there's a great line in that film I spoke about, In the Line of Fire, and Clint Eastwood is asked, he says, why don't you ever get to know your protectee? And he looks at it, he goes, because I figured if I got to know them and I don't like them, I might figure they're not worth taking a bullet for. And that always stuck with me, because we see people in the world that have protection teams that we know are horrible people. And I've always wondered how the protectee's mindset is like, this guy or this person is a real douchebag. I know that, but I'm assigned to protect him. That comes into the close personal protection. You have to become somewhat familiar and close with your protectee, especially with someone like the Prime Minister.
So, you there?
Yeah, mate. So what I'm saying is did you find that with the Prime Minister you actually got to know them personally, or was that a step too far?
No. So Julia Gillard was and politics totally removed from this, an amazing human being, which made it very easy to be able to protect her and to be her primary protection officer. Probably the one thing I would say is, number one, we were always trained that a close protection officer is politically neutral and your opinion means nothing, and you protect the position, not the person.
Yep.
Now, later on in my life, and we'll talk down the track about what I'm doing now, but somewhere along the way, we removed the word personal out of close personal protection. And most of the industry now is known as close protection. Now, I see that as a fatal flaw, because if you remove the human terrain out of a human system, how are you actually effectively moving that human system day to day? That's number one. Number two is, later on in life, when I changed principles and looked after other people that weren't as embracive as Julia Gillard was and weren't really, really nice human beings as JG was, the one thing that got me through looking after them, outside of all of the professionalism piece, because you can be professional and you can keep things at a distance, but when you're doing 16 to 20 hours a day, you're tired, you're in different time zones, you've got jet lag, you're away from your loved ones, you're missing your dog, you can't fake it forever. So what got me through it is, if the person was a real asshole, but I need to protect them because that's my mission, I would imagine the time when the rounds are flying and that person is down with me behind hard cover and they're apologizing to me for all of the times they treated me like shit, and they're saying sorry to me and they're begging me to save their life. And so whenever I was about to give, really wanting to give my protectee a spray for just being a total cock, I would just look at them and I would imagine that. And I would go, yeah, because one day if it happens, you'll be grabbing my hand, looking at me in the eyes and saying, Lucas, I'm sorry for the way I treated you. I will never do it again. Please just save my life. And that's what gets me through, mate.
Wow. Okay. Excellent. So, I mean, that's you've answered my question perfectly there. That's exactly how I would imagine you have to somehow justify it in your mind, because as we know, there's some pretty bad people out there in the world that have close protection officers. And as I said, I've always wondered how they do their job. They could be fanatical. I don't know. That's just the way it is. How long were you on Julia's detail?
So she was Prime Minister for 3 years and 3 days, and I was pretty much on her detail for the entire time of that.
Wow. Okay. Now, I want to go to that infamous day, Australia Day. I think it was 2012. That famous photo. I remember seeing it. I was sitting in a police station down in Melbourne, and I remember seeing the Today Show and Carl Stefanovic giving you the biggest pump up ever in your glamorous shirt, saying, "Look at this guy," and that famous photo of you rushing the Prime Minister out. I had a bit of a laugh about it, but then I thought to myself, Julia looks scared. And then I actually tried to imagine that situation. Tell me about how that day came to be.
Okay, so let's address the shirt first, because this is hilarious. So Prime Ministerial Close Protection Officers traditionally would wear a white shirt.
Yep.
Right. That's just the way. Now, there's some other close protection elements out there that will say the reason why we wear a white shirt is so blood shows up and whatever. It's just a protocol thing, right?
Right. Okay.
So that day I woke up a little bit late. We had two moves. It was Australia Day. I wanted to go to a barbecue, and I was one of the ones that drew the short straw to have to work and look after the PM that day. And I hadn't ironed my shirt. But what I had done is I had this way outside of my budget Pierucci grey shirt with a matching tie that someone had talked me into buying a few years ago, and I'd actually never worn it, but I had it dry cleaned and pressed for I think it was a wedding that was coming up. And I had a look and I thought, you know what, I reckon I can get away. It's only 2 moves, couple of hours at work. I can get away just wearing that one and breaching protocol for today. And then I'll come back and iron shirts when I'm back on the job. So the whole Murphy's Law thing of the one day, if you were ever going to be on the front page of every newspaper on planet Earth, you'd want to be wearing that shirt.
Mate, you know what? It was a great shirt, mate. You look good in it.
Yeah, I think it looked all right. Yeah, it didn't improve the hairline, but yeah. So, mate, so the day, so now that we've addressed Shirtgate, the day was meant to be, and this is the first critical fail, and no one should ever say this in CPP, but it was a pretty stock standard day. We had 2 moves. We were doing the kind of standard citizenship ceremony on the other side of the lake there in Canberra, so with the kind of war memorial in the background on the water's edge. And that was the one that we had some intelligence on. So we had a whole bunch of our, public order riot response team guys in a van. We had extra uniformed police as site security. We had extra CPP as advance officers and site security officers for the ceremony. And that one went off without a hitch. That was move number 1. Move number 2 was the Pork Barrel Cafe at the Lobby Restaurant just across from Old Parliament House. And the briefing for that one is that it was a medal ceremony for some firefighters and state emergency service workers that had been involved in floods and bushfires in the previous year. And so the PM was going to attend that, give a short speech, hand out some medals, stay 10 to 15 minutes for an afternoon tea, and then we're out of there, back to the lodge. She's in the lodge for the rest of the day. We're down tools and home and at a barbecue by kind of 3 p.m. So that's pretty much what happened. Just kidding. something slightly outside of the plan happened.
You've definitely skipped about 6 or 7 points in that story, mate. Start going.
Yeah. So, mate, we turned up. We had a very, very good advanced guy on the ground. So it was just the usual the briefing that you would get. So I turn up. Now, I wasn't actually the PPO that day. I was meant to be the security driver. And then the CPO one, so not the one on the shoulder, but the next one in the kind of stack, pulled me aside in the morning and said that he had a bit of an upset stomach and would I mind transitioning into the close protection officer one role, and he could just security drive in case he needed to be sick or go to the toilet or whatever else, or he could just sit and feel sorry for himself. So I wasn't meant to be on the shoulder at all. I was meant to be sitting in the car outside. And, these type of things happen all the time. So I said, yep, no worries, mate. I'll jump in as CPO 1. So we jump in, we go there, we arrive with the boss, we drop at the front of the lobby restaurant. Then when we're moving the PM inside, the motorcade positions around at the rear kind of right entrance or exit where we were going to finish the movement. And we walk in, I get the brief, the CPO 1 gets the brief from the advance, so he tells me that there's no safe room. If anything happens, punch out to the cars, 10 embassies, 250 metres away, but that situation, no change, standard rims, carry on. Roger that. Now, usually, a lot of the times, if the advance is either a lazy advance or it's just a day like that, they might do the brief, do one more check, then they'll jump in the advance car and go to the next location, which in that case was the lodge. Because it was the lodge and we were downing tools, he said, look, mate, I might just hang around a little bit because the last one's the finishing move for the day. We've got protective service officers at the lodge anyway. I'll just advance 5 minutes before departure time. Cool, no worries. So we go in. It's a glass box, basically. It's all floor to ceiling windows. The Pork Barrel Cafe at the time is just a big glass box. PM goes in, sits down in the front row. We take up our positions as wallflowers, and then comes the time for her to jump up on stage and give her speech and hand out the awards. As she jumps up on stage, myself and the PPO take our positions kind of left and right of the stage, just outside of the camera view. And I notice a bit of a deviation to the baseline outside, so an anomaly to the standard environment. And the anomaly that I noticed was a child that appeared to be Indigenous running around with a nappy on alone, with a T-shirt on with an Aboriginal flag on it. And he was alone, just running around.
Right.
And for some reason, they say that your instinct is the GPS of your soul, so you should always listen to it. And I just had a bit of a gut feeling that why is he here? And then the Aboriginal flag on his shirt tripped my mind about the 10 embassy next door.
Yep.
So I jumped on my comms and just asked my advance guy just to go outside and do a bit of a quick perimeter sweep to just make sure we didn't have any issues that were brewing outside. As that happened, I looked over the PPO's shoulder on the other side of the stage. He had his back to one of the stage side doors that led to the outside of the restaurant. And I just see this woman running at full speed, covered in ochre paint, with her hands up in the air, violently just running. And the look in my eyes prompted him to turn around. He went through the door, went out and engaged her. I ran across the stage, Hollywood style, through the door. As he was engaging her, another guy pops out of the bushes and swings a haymaker at my PPO. I step forward and deal with the haymaker and put him down. Then when I look up, there's about 40 to 60 of them surrounding us. And it was that fast, mate. I want to say it felt like a lifetime, but that moment there, 2 to 5 seconds max from seeing the child getting onto the comms and then me with a guy on the ground and looking up and we're surrounded and getting attacked, 2 to 5 seconds maximum. Wow. It was that fast. And there was no, other than the child outside, there was no pre-incident indicator like the movies that something was brewing. It just happened that fast.
Just kicked off.
That was the initiation of the next the next phase of that famous incident.
So when that kicks off, I mean, what's the protocol? Because you're now dealing with 2 potential threats. There's no one guarding the PM. What do you do?
Yeah, so traditional CPP would say minimum to the threat, maximum to the VIP, which we didn't do. We both got target fixation, and it worked out well. It was outside of our scope of training, but it worked out well because if I didn't punch outside and lean forward into that, maybe the PPO gets a haymaker and he's on the ground and he's got 34 deaths on his hip and a baton and spray. So it was the right call for the moment in hindsight. But the second we jumped up and realised we're in trouble here and we're outnumbered, I jumped on my comms and called the advance and told him to get back on the boss, which he'd already done. So close protection is another one of those things that it's the same as tactical operations. You see a gap, you fill it. Yep. He realised that both of us had charged outside. His immediate reaction was to fall back onto the Prime Minister. Now, when that first part of the incident was kicking off outside, inside, there was situation no change. It was surreal. And you look at the cameras, that the PM's still doing her speech on stage. Everyone's clapping. The advance is standing next to. I've just done the big Hollywood dash across the stage, like a movie and charged outside. But the second we started to take a breath and assess and reassess, we went, okay, now let's go into what we know best. So it was get a key holder, lock the place down. So at the start, we had to hold that door. So myself and the primary protection officer, the PPO, were both outside. The advance organised a key holder to lock all 3 doors on the 3 sides of the restaurant. There was a kitchen at the back with a rear access that we'll talk about soon.
Yep.
They do that. And then I noticed the bulk of the crowd, because we're kind of holding them off at the front, they start to move at the side. They start to move around to the front of the stronghold or the venue. So I fight my way. So the PPO stays holding that door, doing his thing, and I fight my way from the side door to the front door, which is probably about 30 metres, turn right and another 20 metres. Now through that, at that stage, there was about 200 people there. So it was I'd like to say that I was using all of these sexy police advanced close protection jugular notches and brachial plexus origins, and I had my baton out with closed mode strikes. I wasn't. It was a brawl. And I mean, and I know I've seen you talk about this before, but having the skill set that I had then that the AFP didn't give me. So at the time, I was a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I was an advanced Muay Thai kickboxer. I was a wrestler and a grappler. I used to pride myself on being a 360-degree capable human being in a physical confrontation. All of those kind of jiu-jitsu skills and everything is what got me to that front door, because I was manipulating human bodies. There was people throwing haymakers at me, bottles. I later worked out that they were spears and bits of wood and everything else, but I was literally moving people and fighting my way through. And there was a lot of kinetic, hard-handed and soft-handed strikes going on to get me to that front door as well. So I got to the front door, locked that one down, and then I go back into when we talked earlier about the polish. So I'm not a knuckle dragger. I'm a Prime Ministerial Close Protection Officer. So I take a breath, bit of a tactical sigh, get the polish back on. They're not actively attacking me, so I just stand and hold the door with a mental line drawn in front of me that if they cross the line, I'm putting them down. They start yelling and screaming. Yelling and screaming is not a kinetic threat. It's not a lethal threat. So I'm just going to drown that out, and I'm going to be scanning for the things that I need to solve, i.e. lethal threats or people trying to breach the stronghold that we've now locked down. I'm standing there. They start using an elderly woman in a wheelchair to ram my legs because they know that I can't strike her. There's media cameras locked inside trying to film through. And at that moment, I jump on the comms. I call my advanced guy inside, and this was read out at Senate estimates. All the police comms were read out at Senate estimates a little while after the inquiry. But I say to him, code word, this is code word. We need backup. Call the comms center. We need backup. And he replies back to me, who do you think they should send? And I said, fucking everyone. And that was read out at Senate estimates 6 to 9 months later. So it was, if you've got a gun, a baton, a shield, and police powers, and you're in the ACT, get here now. We are 3 versus 200, and they are angry.
We're up shit creek.
Yeah, and I'll try and stay focused on the technical CPP scenario here, but just as a really quick aside, a lot of political stuff around this, right? It was a whole bunch of Indigenous persons from the Aboriginal 10 embassies. So the way that it was reported later was that we overreacted and they were peaceful. They were not peaceful. And if you isolated an individual out of that crowd, they would probably say to you later, I didn't have the intention of doing anything bad. But when you get 200 human beings together that are all highly aroused and working off each other, there's a psychological term for that. So they were violent and they were trying to get access and they were bashing on the windows and I was holding. And then the first General Duty's truck pulled up and they stayed inside and they didn't get out. And I later found out that they stayed inside because when they turned up, they said the situation was too dangerous and they were waiting for more police to arrive while they were watching 2 AFP close protection officers fighting 200 alone. So I've said that publicly before. Yeah, they're all probably deputy commissioners now. That's a joke. But
No,
yeah,
it's
so
not.
that was, yeah. And if I'd have known that at the time, it probably would have destabilized me. So I'm really, really glad I didn't know that, because we weren't panicking. We were just going through our training. And the next phase for that was obviously getting access back inside to work out what we were going to do with the PM as the threat continued to escalate.
Now, inside, the PM's still giving a speech unaware of what's going on.
Yeah, so and that's the optics piece, right? It's don't appear panicked, just look, the team will deal with it. I'll just keep doing my thing. The event continued. From what I understand, the medals were handed out and she went to then it became the afternoon tea part, so everyone was standing. This is the time, and obviously there's a lot of stuff that I've had to work through psychologically after that day, but I don't really remember how we got back inside. They would have had to unlock a door at some stage and let us in because we were locked out, but we ended up back inside. And that was the time when we kind of rallied around the boss. They were bashing on the windows. We knew that the venue integrity was not going to hold for long. You've got 200 human beings surging against these floor-to-ceiling glass windows.
Yeah.
So we've got two options in CPP. We've got sandbag, which is put the boss into a safe room, bunker down and defend it with lethal cover until a police tactical group team comes to extract you out, or landslide, which is fight to the cars, get her into the armoured safe room and then evacuate out of the premises. That's the two options, right, tactically. Yep. Remember at the start when I said we had a really, really good advance officer and he briefed me at the start that there was no viable safe room. That's why the advance officer role is so important, because I immediately knew and I trusted my oppo that there was no viable safe room. But because we kind of immediately knew that this situation was unprecedented, so I turned to the PPO and said, look, how about, are you happy to stay on the boss? I'm just going to go and double, triple check everything because we know that this is going to be a big deal. The Prime Minister is kind of under threat. He says, roger that, go do your thing. I go, I double check the safe room. The advance was right. It was a hollow core door. We couldn't secure it. And there was a window with a cage across it, so we couldn't evacuate out of that safe room if we needed to. The other option was a walk-in fridge, but the fridge locked from the outside. So if we were in there and the threats got inside, they could lock it, set the place on fire. We couldn't get out, Benghazi style.
I was just about to say Benghazi style, yeah.
Yeah, so then we had a look at, okay, so sandbag's not an option. What are our options for landslide? Now, the cars had already been repositioned at the side of the stronghold, but we had about 7 to 9 metres of open ground to cover, and the gold standard would have been to take the motorcade around to the rear. There was a rear private courtyard, like a loading dock with a colorbond gate. Open the gate, get the motorcade in, close the gate, get the boss into the armoured car, and then gingerly drive out of there, fist bumps and high five, coffees at the lodge by 3 p.m. So I go out the rear and check. There's a colorbond gates. Sweet. I go to open the gates and they won't open. So I have a peer over and there's a courier van that had reversed up to do a delivery. This is this Murphy's Law thing about threats, when everything goes wrong at the same time. And if 4 out of 5 things had gone wrong, Australia Day would have never happened, but it was 5 out of 5 things that went wrong. Right. So there was a delivery van that had tried to drop off a delivery. Then we get, attacked. He or she can't go anywhere. They've just diddied on out of there and there's an unattended car that's now blocking the gates. Okay, our other options is it's not going to be clean, but maybe we can boost the boss or find a ladder and get the boss over the colorbond fence, or maybe I can just superhuman my way through it and break a panel off. When I peered over the fence, there was a couple of protesters that were wandering around that side, and one of them sees me and calls the F&Cs going out the rear, and then there's a whole bunch of protesters trying to jump over the colorbond fence.
Oh no!
As they've seen my beautiful bald head pop up and silhouette over there to see if we can get out of there. As that's happening, I left and right, quick check, reassess my environment, and they'd been doing, again, 5 out of 5 things wrong. They'd been doing renovations on the Pork Barrel Cafe, and there was a pile of loose house bricks on one side, and on the other side of me was a pile of loose pieces of timber that they'd taken out of the place that were all about the perfect size of a baseball bat, all in this courtyard. And I'm just kind of looking up to the universe and just thinking, really?
Why?
Like, you're not going to give me anything today? Like,
why are you doing this?
It's just 5 really, really shit decisions, and all you're going to give me is to choose the least shit out of the 5 options. So as that's happening, one of the guys jumps up on the fence and he looks me in the eyes and he goes, you bring that red-headed C out here, we're going to slit her throat.
Oh.
So I immediately jump on comms as I'm falling back into the stronghold now because they're jumping over the back fence. And I go, we've just had a lethal threat team. I don't believe this is just a friendly ride anymore, if there ever was one. Now we need to go kind of to that next level. We need to start to consider the use of lethal cover if required in line with our training. So as I'm going back through, it was just a kind of residential quality security door. So this little 16-year-old key holder's, I've grabbed him by the scruff of the neck because he's got the keys and I'm running around this place, checking safe rooms, checking the rear, and this 16-year-old kid, probably work experience or something. As we go through the door, I grab a pallet from outside and I drag it through the door and I kind of wedge it against the security door. And then I grab him and I wedge him against the pallet. And in the heat of the moment, I've mentioned this before, but in the heat of the moment, I fin hand him and I say, you hold this fucking door. And if you do not hold this door, you die. Do you understand? And he's like, yeah, yes. And then I'm just mission focused. Yeah. So I hope he's probably in close protection now with that type of childhood trauma, but I'm sorry, buddy. But he did a good job. He held the door. So I went back inside. Returning to the optics piece, before I moved from the kitchen out into the public space with all of the punters and the Prime Minister still having their afternoon tea, even though it's threat central on the outside, I take a breath, I straighten my tie and I walk out and big smile, I turn around to my PPO and say, got a sec? And he comes over and I go, yep, rear's not viable, safe room's not viable. At this stage, the only option is the side door, but we need to cover those 7 to 9 meters to get to the car. He gives me a big smile and he says, absolutely agree. We turn to the advance and we say, do you see any other options? And he says, no, I don't. I believe that the course of action is the side door. Then we all triple checked that course of action and we had no other course of action because we knew the level of what we were experiencing. And we all agreed on that. So then the primary protection officer who has primacy for communication with the boss as the PPO grabs Jay's G, pulls her aside, has a glance around. One camera ended up kind of getting in there anyway, but he says, look, Prime Minister, we're going to have to get out of here. We're not sure how much longer these windows are going to hold. And then she says, okay, sounds like a plan, but what about the Leader of the Opposition? I think we need to take him too. So we've all triple confirmed that we're going to landslide the Prime Minister of Australia out of the side door, move her across that 7 to 9 meters and get her into the armoured vehicle, which is the mobile safe room.
Right.
So PPO, we all agree. PPO takes a breath, walks over to the PM, light tap on the elbow. Prime Minister, have you got a second? She says, yes, absolutely. He says, look, we're not sure how much longer this venue integrity is going to hold. We believe the best course of action is to evacuate you to the cars. She turns to him and says, okay, but what about the Leader of the Opposition? I think we had better take him too. And then you can see it on YouTube if your listeners want to look it up.
I have seen it. Yep.
It is a classic look of, we don't train to take two people. We train to evacuate a male, strong Prime Minister of Australia. And then he turns around as the good PPO. Oh, absolutely. I think, yep, we looking at me, we can do that, right?
We can do that.
Of course we can. Yep. So we agree on that course of action. Now, the next one is, how do we secure that column of open ground to get to the armoured vehicle? We've got a locked door to open. We've got some stairs downward to navigate. Then we've got an open bit of ground where we're most exposed, especially from weapons or anything else that the people outside. I had to pause myself for an accurate description. The people outside, the humans outside, it could potentially use against us to compromise our extraction. So we have a look at what we've got. Now, earlier before Movement 1 of the day, we had all of the resources in the world. Well, when Movement 1 was finished, all of those resources went off to Yarralumla to have coffees and kebabs and back to Majura to down tools to enjoy their Australia Day and reek in their double time overtime, and everyone was gone. When I said call fucking everyone, we had 2 or 3 tactical operators turn up with short shields that had just been driving back to Majura that responded in a bunch of uniforms. So, okay, I've definitely got one or two guys with a shield, one short shield, one long shield. That's going to have to do. We're going to have to open the door. Now, looking at the fatal flaws of that day, we had specialist radio frequencies. PTG had different specialist radio frequencies, and GDs had different radio frequencies. So we all couldn't cross-communicate. So I had to go find old mate that I'd threatened his life before with keeping that door barricaded, get the keys off him, and unlock the door to talk to the operator outside to let him know that we were about to breach and go to the cars. So when that was happening, the other thing we decided is we got comms out to the uniformed police outside to make a little bit of a big deal at the front of the venue and start to clear a path so the protesters would think that she was being extracted out of the front. So we threw a bit of a furphy out the front there, and the team started clearing the path. So then all the protesters massed out the front. When they started to mass out the front, we said, right, now's the time to go. We formed up at the door. I was at the front, and the way that our templated training worked was that for me to stand at the front, for the Prime Minister to lock her hands onto my belt, and then the PPO and the advance to my rear left and rear right would grab the Prime Minister's belt with one hand and then grab my belt with the other hand. So we're forming a bit of a human triangle with the VIP in the middle. As this is all happening, we're getting ready to go. The guy outside who's the PTG operator was a bit of a mate of mine, so he's giving me the look and I'm going, he's just frothing, mate. It's like all these Christmases have come at once. He's like, I've been training my whole life for this moment. I've got a shield and 200 people is standing in my way. Let's do this. Just give me the call, brother. So I'm ready there, ready to unleash the beast. And right when we're about to leave the door, this hand just brushes the back of my head in between my head and the Prime Minister of Australia's head. And I think it's one of my guys adjusting the formation or something. So I look around and it's a woman that's one of the attendees reaching through us to grab a champagne and orange juice off a silver tray.
No.
And she looks at me and I look at her and she goes, oh, apologies, carry on, boys. And it was just this really surreal moment. And if you could ever describe the close protection officer experience, is you are moving in the real world, and sometimes that real world environment has a lethal threat aspect, but the real world doesn't pause while that lethal threat aspect is carrying on.
Life goes on.
Sometimes the world just continues on, and it was this really, really surreal moment. I looked at her, looked at my guys and said, oh, well, now that she has her mimosa, are we good to extract the leader of our country now? So we got ready to go, gave the signal, door cracked. As the door cracked open, my mate on the outside hits someone or, delivers a police-approved short shield strike to some very, very responsible, upstanding citizen of our country that does a backflip over the railing and goes across the garden bed, which we look at each other and I've got time to look at him and go, good hit. And as we're moving out of the door, again, the gut instinct is the GPS of your soul. I didn't feel like I had any control over the Prime Minister because I was relying on her grip, not mine, to attach her to my body. So I reached back, and that's where that famous photo came from. I actually reached back to pull her towards and under my arm so I could actually control her and rely on my trained grip, not her grip, from an untrained person, right? As that happened, the crowd at the front realised what we were doing, and then they surged down the walkway, and we had the power of those 200 people hit us from the left-hand flank. And that energy from all of those humans converging is what drove us down those stairs, what drove her to lose her shoe, and what drove us that when we hit the bottom of those stairs, we were moving with so much speed. It was that split-second moment where you see her go from vertical to horizontal. That was because of so much speed. I was focusing on trying to keep my feet that she lost hers, and I managed to catch her and upright her pretty quick. But the guy that took the photos of Australia Day took 900 rapid-fire shots over those 7 to 9 metres and managed to get that one shot where it appeared that I was dragging her by her face to the car, which never happened. She was under control the whole time. There was a moment where there was control was slightly reassessed and readjusted, but she was never out of control the entire time of us getting to the car.
Well, mate, you've got to wonder, and we've seen this happen in several incidents even since, where there's an emergency situation and none of these units are on the same radio channel. We saw it. And we've seen it time and time again. It's something policing still hasn't adapted to well. So if you guys have all had been on the radio station, you could have said, hey, this is code name, Prime Minister's protection officer. I need everyone here now. That could have been the traffic copper, the motorcycle copper, the detectives in just down the street in one of the stations, all the GDs, bang, one hit. It may not have been as hectic as it was.
That's the thing, mate. And I mean, you know, policing culture yourself. That would be almost every police officer's dream, to be sitting at a cafe, to be at a traffic stop somewhere, and all of a sudden the balloon goes up and goes, the Prime Minister is under attack at the lobby restaurant. We need all able-bodied police. There'd be the smile. The hardest part for the bulk of those police were pretending that that they're not going to be smiling and enjoying the drive there to respond. It's every police officer's dream. Now is my time to shine. I've been training for this long. It's now my time to go there and help. No matter what I can do, I'm going to be there and I'm going to contribute. Now,
if I heard that radio call come through, my response would be 2 words: say less.
100%. Now, I've said it before as well, but there was a bunch of AFP management in that lobby restaurant in their full ceremonial uniforms with their racks of gongs and everything else. I didn't really realise how many of them were in there at the time because I was focused on my charge as the Close Protection Officer for the Prime Minister of Australia. But I realised in the months later that not one moment when we were outside punching on with all of those people, when we were inside working out what we were going to do, not one moment did one of those members of management come up, sworn police officers, and tap us on the shoulder and go, hey, look, guys, noting I'm not kitted up, I don't have any accoutrements on, but I'm still a police officer. Is there something you need me to do? And I'd like to just say that out there publicly all the time, because that always stuck with me. Because if the situation was reversed and that was a senior Connie in there on his day off or with his dress uniform on to receive a medal, what do you think that senior constable would do?
Mate, jacket off, take off the tie, take off the hat, couple of quick warm-ups with the neck, let's go.
Time to go to work, boys. What do you need me to do?
Yep. Say less.
Yeah. Say less.
Say less. I'm in. Let's do this. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
So you do manage to extract the Prime Minister. That famous photo goes viral. What's it like after you get her to the safe spot?
So we get her to the lodge. We get her out of the car, and that's when I think the big adrenaline dump and everything happened for her. I think it was surreal for us because we just went into training. It didn't feel like it was real. You just go onto autopilot and you do what you trained to do. And I think it was a bit the same for her. And when we finally got back into the fortress that was the lodge, I got her out of the car. I went through our protocol of patting her down, make sure she hadn't been shot or stabbed or injured. And then I think psychologically, once she realised that she was now safe, it was the moment when she could let the emotion out. So her jaw wiggled a little bit. She got a little bit upset. I've said this out there before as well. She cared more about my safety than hers because I was pretty banged up. I'd lost my comms set that had been torn off. My suit jacket was torn. I had a bunch of, ochre paint all over me. She gave me a bit of a hug. We organised to get Tony Abbott, the leader of the opposition that time, into the car with the PM's driver and to go home. And then she looked at me and said, Lucas, I think I just need to go upstairs and have a moment. And I said, oh, absolutely, Prime Minister. You're all good. If you need me, you know where I'll be. I'll chat to you later. So she went inside. She went upstairs. I walk from the front entrance of the lodge, the ceremonial entrance. I walk around to the staff entrance where we have our kind of breakout room around the back. And the house manager comes running out, making a beeline for me. And she goes, why didn't you tell me that you were coming back early? And then she looks me up and down and she goes, did something happen? And I said, yes, something happened. Can I just have a moment, please?
This was the house manager of the lodge.
Yeah, because they're all about the protocol and the service, right? The PM got back 20 minutes early and she didn't have her cup of ginger lemon tea ready for her and didn't have the curtains drawn and the AC at 24 degrees. So how dare us for not giving her a call?
Yeah. I'm sorry. During my extraction of the Prime Minister from a potential lethal situation, got in the way of you putting the kettle on time.
Exactly, yeah. So, yeah, we went in, we sat down, we flicked the news on, and obviously that big viral photo was the first thing I saw, and my first response was, well, I felt like my face did not look that good the entire time, so I'm glad they managed to get at least a split second where I looked like I was this kind of blue steel. Thank you for being nice to me, media. But then the back door we heard the back door open and then swing closed, and in walks our advance guy. And he's all beaten up. And I'm like, oh, man, I'm so sorry. We forgot all about you. So he got us into the car. We punched out of there. He was fighting and defending the car until it was mobile. And then when the car went out of there, he turned around and the crowd just converged on him and said, right, what are you going to do now? And he had to basically brawl and fight his way out of there to go back to his advanced vehicle and get out. So he turns up to the lodge, breathing heavily, panting, hands on his knees. Yeah, I'm good, lads, I'm good.
No, well, mate, it was a crazy day, and I'll never forget that photo. It's one of those iconic moments in policing. So I mean, and mate, the shirt made it.
The shirt made it, mate.
The shirt made it through.
Yep. And okay. I never wore it again, would you believe?
Mate, I'd have it framed and signed by the Prime Minister if I was you, but, you know.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is I did have on the suit jacket, I had a perfect makeup foundation print of the Prime Minister's face where she kind of fell at that split second and I caught her. I pinned her face to my side to bring her back up into my kind of escort hold. And, I couldn't work out at first what that was. And I went, geez, that's a perfect rendition of Julia Gillard's face on my jacket.
I would have totally had to sign it. You missed an opportunity there, mate.
I should have. Yeah, I should have thought future Lucas would have appreciated that.
So, mate, I know we've got a lot to cover. I do want to get to some other things. But after that, I mean, you know, your transition out of the AFP, you've said on other podcasts, so I'm comfortable in saying this wasn't smooth, it wasn't nice. After that incident, what happens? I mean, you then, because we also then had another transformation of power back to Kevin Rudd.
Yeah. So the entire time I was looking after the PM, there was never a time that we would go to work and just be Prime Ministerial Protection Officer. It was every day we were going to work with Rudd's going to roll Gillard today, Gillard's going to step down today. And it was like that for 3 years and 3 days. So there was never a time where you could go, wow, I'm really comfortable in my position. And then one day it happened. I was looking after Gillard at Parliament House for a sitting week. And it was one of those rare days where we actually did a day shift and finished at 1400. Normally it was full days, but so I thought, this is really nice. I'm going to be home by, leave the lodge at 2, Canberra Life. I'll probably be home with a little bit of traffic. I'll be home by 2:05, and I'll complain about that 5 minutes worth of traffic. Then I might get to go to the gym and actually spend some time in the gym and not be rushing through a workout in a hotel room. So we knew something was bubbling, but it was bubbling no different than any other day and the rumours and everything else. So I got home, de-kitted. Just when I was loosening my tie to take it off, I get a phone call from the superintendent in headquarters saying, hey, two key ministers have come out and supported Rudd. We've had a bit of a tip from inside the room that Rudd's won. You need to get back to work. So I put my kit back on, straightened my tie, drove back to work and went down to the party room and waiting outside, a whole bunch of media cameras. Gillard walks out, obviously upset. And she starts to walk and then I don't follow her. And she stops for a second and she turns around and she says, Lucas, what are you doing? Are you coming? I said, apologies, JG, but I've got to look after Kevin Rudd. He's the Prime Minister. I'm so sorry. And she just had this little bit of a look of dejection in her eyes and kept walking. And it was like, when we talk about you don't get attached to your protectee and there's no human terrain in close protection anymore, that split second, it was like someone had punched me in the stomach. And knowing the difference, the contrast between the two humans, so I had to watch her walk down the hallway. Now, she still had protection because they get protection for a certain amount of time when they finish being a Prime Minister. And then depending on levels of threat for years later, who knows? That's for the AFP to decide. But the decision was that I was to go straight onto Kevin Rudd and stand up a team for him. So for the next couple of months, we had the Prime Ministerial Close Protection Team split into half with a whole bunch of surge members protecting two protectees while we had the ex-Prime Minister and then the new Prime Minister in Kevin Rudd.
Wow. I mean, you've obviously formed a close relationship with Prime Minister Gillard and then you've got to switch to Kevin Rudd. I mean, the personalities, like you said, are completely different. Tough transition.
And I could probably say it. I don't think I've told this one before, but the contrast was that once Rudd was stabilised with his other ministers and stuff, and they were having a bit of a meeting, and I was just, wasn't offered a chair. I just kind of stood there on a hard floor outside in Parliament House waiting for a heads up on what the next move was going to be and where we were going and whatever else. I quickly ran around to our office where Gillard and the rest of her staff and everything were packing up the Prime Minister's office because she was no longer Prime Minister, and everyone had their arms around each other, crying, super upset, really, really sad, emotional environment. I grab my essentials that I need. I go back around to the other side to where the Kevin Rudd faction is, and they're all got their arms around each other, jumping up and down, yelling and screaming and cheering that they've finally defeated the evil witch, blah, 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 blah. And now it's time to make things right. And it was a really weird contrast for me to be involved in emotionally, because I'm seeing someone that the 3 years that I was looking after JG, it's not just prime ministerial stuff. I got to know her father. He was a copper in Wales a million years ago before he immigrated to Australia. Every time she spent time at her parents' house in Adelaide, in a little retirement village, I'd be having cups of tea with her dad. Then I was by her side when her dad got sick and eventually passed away. I was by her side at her father's funeral. Then I was, by her side at the births of nieces and nephews and weddings and, holidays. The Prime Minister doesn't just not be the Prime Minister when they're on holidays. You're experiencing all of these things with them and you get to know them really, really, really well. So it was almost like I was dealing with a bit of a loss, and then dealing with that loss and then having to deal with the other climate that I was walking into really, really, really stretched all of my skill set of being that kind of polished Prime Ministerial Close Protection Officer. Now, I take pride in that skill set. So obviously I delivered everything to an amazing high-level professional standard to the best of my ability. But yeah, there was a lot of times on the inside where I was fantasizing about that. I'm sorry for everything I did, Lucas. Please save me. I promise I'll never do it again moment to get me through to the next shift.
Wow, mate. Well, mate, you definitely had a roller coaster of a career. There's no question about that in the AFP. But you, what year did you leave the AFP?
Late 2018. So post PM's team, I went back to the Israeli team. So when Rudd lost government, they rotated us all off. Went back to the Israeli team for about 5 minutes and thought, this is too far in my rear view. Then they offered me a spot to go over to specialist training. So I went over there and spent a few years, ended up being basically I want to say the most senior trainer or the head of specialist operational safety training for the AFP. So looking after, obviously, and rebuilding and re-energising the AFP Close Protection Program with the lessons that we learned from Australia Day, making all of our tactical drills and reactions to attack and emergency action drills and escort holds gender neutral, because you don't know if the Prime Minister is going to be a male with a leather belt or a female with a pencil skirt on and no belt and heels, So did all of that. Finished my time in specialist training. My last 13 months in the AFP, I actually deployed to Papua New Guinea full-time for APEC in 2018. So I went up there, trained 450 of their specialist police in close protection, trained 65 of their drivers in CPP motorcading and driving and everything else. And we basically set up and assisted PNG in delivering a successful APEC in 2018 for 25 economies. And it was the first time in Papua New Guinea's history that police over there were entrusted with firearms to actually protect world leaders, which was a kind of a really good accolade for us. Going over there, not knowing what we were walking into and starting with a green field and ending up with a really high-level, well-trained capability. And yeah, at the end of that, I was passed over for promotion the 4th or 5th time in a row, even though I'd been acting 2 steps above my rank, which is technically not allowed unless a commander signs off on it. So the writing was on the wall, and I'd already been, obviously, in my close protection world, doing jobs in Afghanistan and Iraq and in other fun places around the world with the AFP. You get to meet a whole bunch of contracting companies and everything. And there was one company in particular that was offering me work a lot and wanted to get me over to have a look at their training systems and to be a security advisor for them. And that one day, standing in Port Moresby, when I got that email saying I wasn't successful yet again for another promotion, after I'd just given an entire country high-level close protection capability, I decided to take the offer and walk out the door.
And how was that, mate, after what, almost over 12 years of a pretty high-tempo life? You walk out the AFP for the last time. Was it the sense of relief, a sense of regret, or a sense of how are you feeling?
I didn't sleep for about 2 weeks before I resigned from the AFP, and I didn't really know what I would be, Lucas Atkins, without a badge and a gun. The day that I was walked out of headquarters and I stepped onto the footpath there in Barton in the ACT, I looked up, the sun was shining, the birds were chirping, and I could still breathe. And I thought, man, it sounds so funny, but I thought to myself, I'm still me. Like, I'm still alive, I'm still walking, but now the handcuffs are off. I can actually do what I'm passionate about without the politics, without the look, close protection is not really a valued skill set in the AFP. If you want to progress, you should be an investigator or work in internal affairs or broaden your skill set. Now I can just be Lucas Atkins, and you don't have to go through a whole bunch of rigmarole and processes to hire me. You can just call my company and pay me, and I can turn up and give you what you need. So it was quite nice. I obviously did a lot of contracting with
going back to that line in The Bodyguard. The money's good, mate. The money's good.
The money's good. The money's good. And yeah, that was a really good introduction. Sally Stone was my first boss for Heart International Australia. Yep. Sally was great. She's a really tough hand, and you have to be a tough hand for being a woman in the position of a private security company
100%.
with, at that time, 80 ex-specialist police and special forces dudes trying to dominate you daily. But she really converted me from being an Australian Federal Police federal agent to being a security advisor, civilian private security contractor, media advisor, national training director, running security awareness for vulnerable environments training from everyone from diplomats right through to media, then taking media into some interesting corners of the world so they can film and cover things. And the difference between looking after a reporter and looking after a prime minister is when it gets kinetic with a prime minister, you're out of there. When it gets kinetic with a reporter, they've got to be able to stay as long as possible to actually report on the story. So you've got to keep them there until it gets really, really bad where you need to go. But you've also got to make sure the camera person doesn't film a war crime or film the security forces or film the threat enough that then they start to target us. So security advisor work in a close protection capability is probably the most intense drinking of the Kool-Aid or the biggest CPP drug that you could do. And, now it's 2026 and I'm still going deeper and deeper into the path of close personal protection. I haven't found the edges yet. I've come pretty close and I've had to take some little sabbaticals here and there and do a lot of self-work. But it's leaving the big machine and then going into the contracting capability. You're actually appreciated for your skill set. You're not run down like the red-headed stepchild of an organisation that doesn't appreciate you, even though you spent 3 to 4 years rubbing shoulders with world leaders and conversing with world leaders and being a really, really good representative of the organisation. But then they don't appreciate that skill set. The second you leave, people think you're a god. And I know I'm not a god. You know that we're not gods with our background, but it's actually really nice to get an appreciation and a recognition that maybe you might know a little bit of something when you've been doing something for nearly 20 years.
Exactly. Mate, before we get on to what you're doing now, in recent years, there's been some pretty high-profile incidents that have happened. We've had the attempted assassination of the Slovakian Prime Minister as he was walking a fence line. We've had the attempted assassination of Donald Trump when he was running for president at the rally in Pennsylvania. And then, of course, we had the assassination of political commentator Charlie Kirk. Now, all three of these incidents that I just mentioned, I could go down a 6-hour rabbit hole on the conspiracies behind it and what people are thinking. I want to talk to you from a protection point of view because all these things have been caught on camera. Let's start with the Slovakian Prime Minister. Okay. How could that have been done better? Because to me, from a person with a very limited close protection background, that looked like an absolute shit show.
Okay. So I'll say one blanket statement for all three scenarios so no one outside of this podcast criticizes me. And the blanket statement is as follows. I have no knowledge of the background or the lead up to the event or the operators on the ground, and I have no context. And it's exactly the same as all of the people that came out. And there wasn't a lot of them, but there was some critics for my incident for Australia Day. So it would be remiss of me to sit here and to basically run down another close protection unit when I was involved in a scenario that people ran me down for. So what I will say is, let's have a look at it objectively and let's look at it through the lens of a learning outcome so that close protection as itself can evolve as it moves forward. So anything that I say here is not directed as a criticism towards the teams on the ground. It's just an objective analysis of what went wrong. So Slovakian, one statement, I'll say one sentence that corrects the entire scenario. Too many close protection officers spend their days at an environment, not in an environment. Too many close protection officers are at the environment and they're not in the environment. You can see clearly on the footage that when the threat, because we dehumanize the language, when the threat fires at the Slovakian Prime Minister, President?
Yes, Prime Minister, yep. Robert Fico, I think his name is.
Yep. So the threat fires. You see one of the close protection officers on the on the protectee side of the barrier flinch for a split second.
Yep.
Because he's physically in the correct position, but he's psychologically not in the room.
Yeah.
So he's not in the environment. He's there for yet another move, another tick. What's this one? A meet and greet with a barricade. Number one. Number two, there is a close protection officer in the crowd, which is a really good tactic. They know what they're doing. Most close protection teams that don't know what they're doing will just be protecting the VIP on the private space side of the barrier, and then there'll be no one implanted in the crowd. But where's the threat coming from? It's not coming from the protectee side of the barrier. It's coming from the uncleared member of the public side of the barrier. So they had someone in the crowd. Great job. Psychologically not in the correct position, because by the time the threat drew the weapon and fired, he was already on the back foot.
Yeah.
So what went wrong with that scenario is that threats don't just happen when a gun comes out and rounds start flying. Threats happen 4 or 5 steps upstream from that beforehand. If you have a close protection team that is psychologically aware and immersed in their environment and they're analysing baselines and investigating anomalies, usually, because 2% of the time we just can't solve it, we're in the risk mitigation business, not the risk elimination business, 98% of the time, hey, mate, how are you? Can I just have a chat to you? My name's Lucas. I'm a close protection team here. I'm just wanting to have a chat. Fuck, he's got a gun. And then then it becomes not attempted assassination, it becomes attempted attack on, and you solved it upstream.
Yep.
Now, the final thing I'll say for that is protectees should never be standing flush with a barrier reaching into a crowd. A protectee should be standing at least a metre back from the barrier, forcing the crowd to reach out towards them to shake hands, to where the close protection team can monitor the interaction between the member of the public. That's what we would call in close protection, our white space.
Right.
That's our monitored space. So that was another thing. There was times when he was offset back, but then he was moving into the crowd as well. So same as you, mate, I could talk about it for probably 3 days straight, but that's my real 40,000-foot analysis of the scenario.
Mate, it was a good analysis. It was, and that you've actually pointed things out to me that I wouldn't have thought about. So yeah, that was really good. Now let's move on to Donald Trump at the rally in Pennsylvania. Okay,
I'm going to try it. Yep. I'm going to try and keep this theme going, mate, of one sentence and then I'll delve into it. But yep.
Right. So this is what we now know. Okay. So Donald Trump's team was basically a skeleton crew. The rest of the team was looking after Jill Biden down the road. He only had 3 or 4 actual Secret Service agents with him. The rest were people from the Department of Homeland Security who had obviously done some kind of protection course, but it wasn't their full-time job. Now, the video that we've just shown, you can hear after the shots are fired and Donald gets hit in the ear, they're down on the ground for a long time, and it takes them a long time to get off the stage. I'm now going to let you take over.
Okay, I'll keep my challenge going. So one sentence that would have corrected that entire event: resources do not equal adequate protection. And sometimes throwing a whole bunch of resources at a protection operation can have the opposite effect. Has someone checked that rooftop? You know what? Those Homeland Security guys, that must be their slice of the pie. They'll be all over that, Rog. What are you questioning them for, mate? Have you seen how many bodies they've got? Of course they checked at an obvious rooftop with a perfect slope on it that would be great for a sniping position.
Get the local police to look at it. Yeah, just palm it down to them.
Yeah, someone's done it, mate. The other thing too is that close protection is a 2 to 9 metre discipline. It's called close personal protection for a reason. Counter sniping capabilities is something that is not close protection. So what I'll probably say is skeleton crew, the only security issue from the specific event, so we're talking about a middle distance rifle fire shot towards a protectee. From a close protection perspective, it's kind of irrelevant whether they had 4 or whether they had 9 CPP officers or whether they had 50. Because if they had 50 on that stage, the dude's still taking a shot because it's outside of their immediate sphere of operational influence.
Yep.
So I would say that event came down to, we've got so many resources, we just assume that someone's done that or someone's, conspiracy theories aside. The second part of the event was allowing him, as in Donald Trump, to dictate the pace once the round started flying.
Yes.
And I saw a lot of criticism, and we've both seen this a lot. There's all these armchair experts that come out when an event happens, and they say, look at that woman Secret Service officer. She's barely 5 foot tall. What the fuck could she do? The size of a close protection officer is irrelevant, because when the rounds start flying, you don't put your body cover on over the protectee. You fold the fucking protectee down to where you can body cover them. Now, if I'd like to say that if it was a different scenario and if it was a perfect scenario, Donald Trump is never getting the opportunity for that amazing shot. Bad for Donald Trump, good for his safety, because the second that happens, he doesn't have a say anymore. It's grab the body by the arms, get it down behind hard cover, assess your next move, communicate with the body to where you're going, get that lethal cover up, have that column protected, and then move to the next point of hard cover. Then go through another battle pause, take a breath, make sure the protectee is stabilized, make sure your resources are in place. Are we landsliding or are we sandbagging? We're landsliding. Okay, sir, when I tell you to go, do you see your car there? We're going to move to the rear tire. We're going to pause for a second. Do you understand? Yes, I do. Cool. Ready to go? On me. Good to go? Okay, up, move. And it's a staged approach. I would have taken pride, whether it was Donald Trump or whether it was Kevin Rudd or Julia Gillard or anyone else, I would have taken pride in a scenario like that if we're talking in a vacuum of them never being able to get that photo. And exactly the same as my Australia Day incident. The fact that they got that photo of me standing like that with the Prime Minister of Australia physically distressed and psychologically distressed is not a win for close protection. And that's why the escort holds that I invented after that and developed after that, you can't see the Prime Minister's face or you can't see the protectee's face. They're hidden behind you where they should be.
Right. Well, mate, I tell you, one person came out of that scenario on top. The Secret Service agent that made it to Donald Trump first, he was the senior agent on his team. He's now the director of the Secret Service. So he definitely got a massive promotion. That's like going from sergeant to commissioner in the matter of 12 months. So
I wish the AFP took a note out of the Secret Service.
Well, yeah, I didn't mean to rub that in your face there, mate. So finally, when we all saw, it was probably about 4:45 in the morning. I'm nursing my 3-month-old baby in the morning, and I get a text message from a friend in the States that just reads, "Holy shit, Charlie Kirk." And I went, that doesn't sound good. And of course, I opened my Instagram, and there's the horrendous footage of him taking that round in the neck. Now, as we said, we could go down the conspiracy rabbit hole all day about this because there's a lot of unanswered questions, but I want to look at it from a protection point of view. I did see the podcast on the Sean Ryan podcast where he interviewed his head of security. And there was one thing I didn't like about it, and what you've just spoken about, complacency and palming jobs off to other people. He definitely did that, and that really annoyed me because he was definitely saying that the campus police should have checked that gap where they could have taken a shot from. And he got a text message from the campus police saying, we've looked, it's fine. You're the protection guys, you should have checked that. That's my opinion. Now I want to hear yours.
Yeah, so continuing on with my solve every scenario with a single sentence challenge.
Go on.
Access increases risk. And what I mean by that is the intention of that event was for Charlie Kirk to be approachable and to have a dialogue with anybody that wanted to turn up. And what protectees sometimes need to understand is that if you want to appear to have access and to be a man of the people, with that comes a fuckload of increased risk.
Yep.
The second part of that is exactly your comments there. It's the same thing as the Secret Service incident with Donald Trump. Assumptions are the mother of all tactical fuck-ups. And we need to make that onto a shirt. Maybe we'll call Matty Morris and get him to pump some shirts out. Assumptions are the mother of all tactical fuck-ups. Oh, the campus police will have that. And the campus police go, oh, no, the CPP team should have that. And in that perfect gap is where threats grow and threats materialise. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, it was just such a horrible, horrible thing to see. And, I mean, you got to keep in mind, too, that Charlie's team isn't the Secret Service. They're a private company. They don't have the resources. They don't have counter snipers. They don't have, they've probably got, I think he has got like 6 or 7 people that were directly looking after him. Probably one of the most horrible things I've ever seen. That incident,
And this is the thing. It's when you're looking at private close protection, especially for high level figures, a lot of them are these tier 1 Delta type guys, and that's great. But what close protection training have you had for so we've got the hitman sorted, but what about the polished monk? Where's I always say that close protection is half monk and half hitman. Where is that part of your skill set, and where's that been developed? Because yes, you can shoot the dick off a bee. Yes, you've done 1 million tours of Afghanistan, but have you dealt with actually having to have a difficult conversation with a protectee and saying, hey, just to let you know, attending that university tomorrow, that access is great, and we see the intention of what you want to achieve with the event, but just for your awareness and for your education, that does increase the risk to you in a place where people can go and buy a long arm from a Walmart. So just to let you know. And then that's where the dialogue, and maybe it's not directly with Charlie Kirk, maybe it's with his staff or with the family, and it's where the dialogue at least occurs that, maybe that was always going to happen. Or maybe it could have been avoided if somewhere upstream someone said, look, how about there's some pretty credible threats coming in here. Why don't we have a look at maybe some ballistic glass to put in front of him? We know it sucks. He doesn't look like he's approachable to the people, but do you want Charlie Kirk's message to continue to the world?
Yep.
Or do you want it to not continue by him being killed? So that's where these kind of upstream conversations can happen. And that's where the whole system of communication, navigating not only the protectee, but navigating the protectee's staff and the protectee's family is critically important as a close protection skill set.
Yeah, wow. It's such a shame. And I do feel sorry for that team. It would never be nice to lose your principal.
No, it's horrendous, and I do. My heart goes out to them, and it's something that they'll never get over. It's something that they will never recover from.
No,
that's close protection. I don't know why we do it sometimes. Close protection's a disposable camera profession, and sometimes you've only got one shot in that camera, and then you're done.
Well, mate, thank you for your expert analysis on that, because I as I said, mate, I said in the intro, there's a lot of armchair experts in the world, and when things like this happen, I tend to take a big step back, and you start reading comment sections. I'm like, mate, what do you know? What do you know? The world's all of a sudden becomes experts on mass shootings or close protection or whatever the situation is. So I always like to take a step back. You are now free from government contracts, from the government handcuffs, so to speak, mate. This is the part I've been really looking forward to talking about. What's next for Lucas Atkins?
Yes, so I've recently moved to a different country in Southeast Asia now. So I just finished a 5-year contract over in Indonesia with still attached to Australian government, but that's finished. It started about 18 months ago when I had, we have a whole bunch of contractors coming in to do tasks, and I had a leave cover come in, and he was someone that I'd trained back in the AFP a long time ago when I was running close protection training. And he was one of the guys that really stood out for me. And then he's been a little bit of my spirit animal / muse ever since then. And he's a very, very good close protection officer. He's out in the private sector now as well. But when I went to Hart for work for Sally, I called him and said, I want you to come and work with me. And he dropped everything and left Canada and came and worked with me there. And then when I went to Indonesia to pick up a contract there, I called him and said, I need you here. And he came over. And one day, about 18 months ago, he was preparing to take a high office holder into a regional place in somewhere, Dangerousville somewhere. And I was just doing my job, and I looked back and I looked at him double and triple checking all of his medical kit and all of his equipment and everything else. And I looked at it and I turned to him and I said, mate, blah, blah, your name. I've just realized that I think I was an okay close protection instructor only now, 10 years later. He said, why is that? And I said, because I looked at you and I realized that the way that you do close protection and your skill set has actually surpassed mine. And I wasn't feeling like, fuck, I need to be better and I need to compete with him. I was genuinely happy for you. And I was genuinely happy that I created someone that evolved beyond me. And he goes, oh, don't be stupid, LA, blah, blah, blah. You're the Michael Jordan of CPP, blah, 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 ego, ego, ego. And I said, no, mate, I don't need to hear that. I just felt genuinely great. So that was the first part. Then the next trigger was I went home that night and I asked myself a serious question. I said, am I delivering now when I deliver close protection training around the world as part of my kind of contracting role with all the other operational stuff I do and the advisory, have I evolved anything since 2015 or am I still teaching the same of everything from 2015? Maybe I've stagnated. And then that was like a little grain of sand in the back of my head that I couldn't shake. And I started to feel uncomfortable because when I first went into close protection, there was these old dinosaurs there that we used to critique and go, oh, they haven't changed since the 90s. What are they doing? And have I become that? Have I become the very person that I... Yeah. So then about that time, obviously I, like every copper does, you've got to hopefully the best case scenarios we work through some of our little skeletons in our mind that would keep us up at night or give us nightmares. So I went through a little bit of a journey with that. And then I last year, I went down to the Sacred Valley in Peru in a place called Cusco for a ayahuasca retreat. And I won't go down a big plant medicine path here, but I went down because a lot of the psychological stuff I was doing was fine, but I felt like I needed to try something a little bit further out there to try and investigate some things that were going on in my mind, because I wanted to, move forward as a human being and actually be happy for once and relax and everything else. So I went and did this ayahuasca retreat. And very, very long story short, this could be a podcast in itself, so I won't drag on, but I did over 7 days. It was all like a proper retreat, no recreational drug stuff. This is all legit with shamans that, lineages go back before empires and everything else. And the first ayahuasca ceremony I had, not too much happened, and I came out of it feeling pretty frustrated, thinking I'd spent all this money and traveled 60 hours to South America to not have anything. The second one absolutely horrified and terrified me, where I was basically killed over and over and over again and felt and watched myself inside and outside at the same time in this ayahuasca experience. Wow. Of all these masks being ripped off my face and me being reduced back to a 5-year-old child and feeling like a victim. And I haven't felt like a victim since I was 12 years old. That was the whole thing we spoke about at the start of the podcast. Then the third ceremony came back and I got this whisper in my ear saying, what the fuck are you doing? Just be Lucas Atkins. And that's what sparked this next phase of my life. So it was a combination of, have I stagnated, and just be Lucas Atkins. So what I've created, the last 18 months I've been building it, and I'll say it out for the first time now. The company I've started is called Novert Group. And the reason why it's called Novert Group is I started to drill down into close protection. Not only have I stagnated, but in reality, the last time close protection was updated was kind of in the 2 years following the Reagan shooting in the States, 1981 to 1983, was really the last time that there was a seismic shift in close protection tactics. So that means that teams now are running around with fax machine technology in a smartphone supercomputer AI environment. So what the fuck are we doing? So that was the first question I needed to solve to get that grain of sand that was niggling in the back of my mind on whether I'd stagnated. The second part of the question was, okay, so if Lucas Atkins walked into a room tomorrow and someone gave him a blank whiteboard and said, we need you to keep this world leader alive, or this celebrity alive, or this sheikh billionaire alive, we need you to develop a training system that will be able to have them deliver close protection operations for 2026. What would that look like? So the first 6 months I had to break down all of my legacy experience, because I am CPP legacy. Like that is, I was one of the biggest proponents for it. So what I did is I broke everything down and I built a system that not only is applicable to 2026, not 1981 to 1983, but I combined all of the things that I was trying to run away from when I was trying to leave close protection into a modern close person protection system that combines close protection, neuroscience, neuro-linguistic programming, psychotherapy, mindfulness, yogic practices into a close protection system that makes the close protection officer psychologically aware, more adaptable, and a way better communicator for the protectee's staff, and the family around them as well. So what you have now is you don't have someone flinching as the Slovakian Prime Minister gets shot. You have someone that is so psychologically adaptive and immersed in their environment from the protective system that they've trained, that they sense the shift way earlier. And that's where Novert comes in. So the other problem with close protection is it relies on fixed templates. Now, how many times, mate, have you heard someone say a plan is great, but the threat gets a vote, and when the first round fires, the plan goes to shit?
Or goes to shit.
Yeah. What about what would happen if you could take that obscurity away from the threat and give it back to a close protection team? That's what Novert is. So for forever, close protection has always run in two modes: overt and covert.
Overt, yep.
So we know overt. It's the Secret Service guy with a suit on and sunglasses and an earpiece, and he's standing out there and he's don't fuck with me because blah, 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 right? Then we've got covert. What's covert? It's someone standing in cargo pants with a plaid shirt on with the same sunglasses and the same earpiece, and they're blending in, they're covert. But in reality, covert is just overt in cargo pants, a plaid shirt and sunglasses. It's not really a change to an operating system, right? So then what I had to look at is I said, okay, so we've got that problem first. So let's solve that problem. What is the intention if you're working in a protective posture where you're projecting an overt presence? Why are you projecting overt? Obviously, it's for protectee reassurance and for physical deterrence for members of the public. That's great. So that's consciously choosing the protective posture that you are physically and psychologically in. What about covert? What about if we had a look at covert and said, okay, let's just not put on cargo pants and a plaid shirt. Let's have covert as an actual protective posture. So what does covert look like? Covert is where you may need to reduce your signature and slightly blend in the environment, where we know the threat knows that you're there. They can't immediately pick you, but they know that you're there. Now, why would you want to be in covert? Maybe you're somewhere where the protectee doesn't want a big physical presence of close protection officers. Maybe they're just shopping on a weekend and they don't want you walking around in a suit and sunglasses. So now we start to drill into, okay, so covert is a treatment for this, and overt is a treatment for that, and covert is a treatment for that. But is there another? So if the threat has obscurity, how can we disarm the threat in a 2026 nihilistic environment where threats blend in? They've got cameras, they use drones, they use information technology. How can we take the obscurity away from them and give it back to the CPP team? Why don't we build a third layer of protection and term it Novert? And Novert is total signature reduction, removal, and immersion into the environment, where the protectee knows that they have a CPP team. The threat out there knows that, hey, this is a pretty important person. We know they've got a CPP team, but where the fuck are they, and how many of them are around? Is there 3? Is there 100? Yep. I don't know. And putting that doubt into the threat's mind is giving the obscurity back to the protection team. Now, why do you want to be in Novert? So you've consciously either chosen overt, you've consciously chosen covert, And now you've consciously chosen novert because maybe the protectee is going for a walk at a riverside at 3 p.m. on a Saturday. There's nobody around. There's sight lines as far as the eyes can see. He's had a stressful day and he wants to physically decompress without some bloody male and female monkeys standing all over him and clearing bins and everything. But he psychologically knows they're still there, and there's going to be trade-offs for novert. But if you're absolutely immersed in your environment and you're aware, how long does it take to transition back to overt if there's a disturbance or an anomaly to the baseline? Exactly. Transition, bright, shift. Back to overt, physical deterrent, stabilize the boss. What do we do next? So the name of the system that I've created is called variable protective postures. And number one, it is the only close protection system that is protectee-centric. The way that I learned close protection and the way that most other people do it, they treat the protectee and the VIP like they're cargo, like they don't matter. Their psychological safety should be number one. So a VPP operator, a close protection officer trained in novert variable protective postures, is trained on three things. Number one, inside first. If you cannot regulate your internal state, what use are you for assessing or responding or reacting to your external environment?
Yep.
So number one in the VPP system is inside first. Do I have a state mismatch? Is everything online, physically and psychologically? Ooh, Kevin Rudd just called me old boy. I've been protecting him for 9 months and he hasn't even learnt my first name. What a fuckwit. Oh, hang on a second. That feels like an emotional trigger. Is my state aligned for assessing and responding and working inside my external environment if I'm triggered by something a protectee says? No. Tactical sigh. Okay, trigger resolved. We are back aligned. Inside first. Outside second. What's going on in your environment? Every environment speaks to you. Threats don't appear out of nowhere. You are not at the environment in novert close protection. You are in the environment. You are immersed in it. What is the environment saying? Well, we've stabilized a baseline. Hey, that guy doesn't seem right. Why doesn't he seem right? Well, he's standing in a cafe where the dine-in tribe would usually hang out, but he appears like a takeaway guy. He's got close proximity to a table, hasn't ordered a coffee, doesn't look like he needs to be there. Can someone go and have a conversation with him? Outside second. The final rule of novert variable protective postures in our close protection system is protectee always. The protectee is not cargo. They are a sensor. They are also your immediate feedback. If the protectee feels unsettled or if the protectee feels psychologically unsafe, solve that as well. Focus on the protectee. It's close personal protection for a reason. It's not close protection in our system because we do not remove the human terrain out of the system. So in short, mate, what I've created from have I stagnated to just be Lucas Atkins to a blank whiteboard, 18 months later, I've built a system that I'm going to get a lot of criticism for. And that's amazing because the system is not Lucas Atkins. It's a living system. Right now, it sits in my lap because I spent 18 years developing it. But everybody that comes and trains in the system becomes part of the living system. And in 5 years' time, if Lucas Atkins' name is attached to variable protective postures, the mission has failed. We need to be able to adapt as fast as information technology and threats are adapting. And right now, the close protection world is theatre. It is not adaptation. They are performing CPP, which we saw with the Slovakian Prime Minister. They're performing. They're standing in the right position because they're performing. It's theatre over adaptation.
Yep.
So that's where I've taken it. Now, that's the professional system is very protective postures. We're about 2 to 3 weeks away from releasing the first system, which is the online program. So the gateway to the novert variable protective postures close personal protection system is the online gateway. The program is called the Invisible Edge. I know I'm going to get a lot of criticism, so I spent 18 months building the doctrine, the curriculum, 40 SOPs. The program is 12 modules, 60 lessons. There's formative assessments at the end of every module. There's an 80-question summative assessment at the end of the program. You're required to submit a full operational document portfolio and a personal doctrine statement. Now, normal close protection training would be formations and ticks in the box. What I've designed for this is it is a total system recalibration of you as a human being. You will start the training online with no PowerPoint, no bullshit. It's a 15 to 20 minute tactical TED talk from me. It's personal journal reflection. It's awareness missions and tasks to complete. And at the end of it, you don't just come out of it with a qualification and a certificate. You come out being a variable protective postures close personal protection officer, not only relevant for 2026, but upgradable for as long as you are a close protection officer. That's number one. Number two, it's not the end. It's the ignition point of your personal doctrine, because you've got 60 lessons worth of journaling where you're not only going to be a great close personal protection officer, you're going to be a better optimized human being. And Xander, mate, what do you think that does for the mental health of an industry in policing and the military, where we have trauma, divorce, numbness, suicide? Because at somewhere along the way, our humanity, probably right before World War I, separated the warrior and the seeker. They were never meant to be separate, mate. The monks, back in the day, the Shaolin monks and the samurai, they mastered themselves and their spirit before they perfected their weaponry in combat. Then all of a sudden, we ended up now in 2026 with a bunch of people who can act but can't feel, and then a bunch of people who can feel but can't act. So the warrior and the seeker were never meant to be separate. So what I've done is my mission in the last 18 months, and why I've taken the plunge and I've started this company and I've moved to my place in a new country and I'm not contracting and I don't have any fallbacks, is it's not about the money, it's about fixing close protection and bringing it through until 2026. And, they say that the universe rewards you at your level of audacity, and I have gone pretty much all in on this. So it's fixed close protection or don't, but this is coming. And to all of you out there, the second this is released, your drills are obsolete. And that's fine. Close personal protection will continue on. But do you want templated drills or adaptive operators? It's up to you.
Well, mate, I don't doubt after that sales pitch, you're going to have a lot of people wanting to do this course, myself included. I'm definitely going to give it a crack. Mate, this has been a fantastic podcast, mate, and I'm really, really happy that you're free of the government contracts and doing something you're really passionate about, because I think this is what you were put on this earth to do. You know, going back to that 5-year-old kid protecting his mum to all the way now to rewriting the doctrine of close protection. I think you're an absolute gentleman. I think you're a warrior. I think you're a monk, all wrapped into one. Mate, this has been a fantastic podcast. Of all the ones I've done, this has been the most enjoyable. No offense to any of my other podcast guests, but this has been fantastic. Mate, thank you so much for joining me. Mate, we're going to keep in contact, no doubt. The moment next time you're in Australia, I was only in Thailand just last month and we missed each other, so I was spewing about that. Before we go, mate, as I said, I've written a book and I always ask 3 questions to people before they leave, mate. What are you reading? What are you watching? What are you listening to? Go.
Oh, okay. What I'm reading is a hard one because I read a whole bunch of things. But funnily enough, at the moment I'm rereading Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey.
Yep.
The
Great
reason
book.
why I'm rereading it, so I listened to the audiobook a few years ago, and it's him reading the audiobook, and it's a really, really good book, right? I usually read a lot of deeper things. My mum randomly sent me a package recently for Christmas, and it turned up, obviously where I am, turned up a little bit late, and it was a hard copy of Green Lights. And I said, Mum, we had a whole conversation 2 years ago about how good that audiobook was, and I actually gifted you the audiobook on Audible, and now you bought me the hard copy. And she went, oh my God, I'm getting old, I'm so stupid. But then I thought, you know what? Don't ignore the signs that the universe presents you. So maybe there's something in that book you didn't pick up the first time that you need to pick up the second time. So at the moment, I'm reading Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey with a whole bunch of other neuroscience books I'm going through, here and there. What's the next one?
What have you been watching? You probably don't have much time to watch movies or TV, but I'll take a chance anyway.
Mate, I like to rot my brain. As I said, I'm trying to get a bit more balance in my life. What am I watching at the moment? I recently watched that plastic documentary on Netflix, which put me back into an anti-plastic spin. So I've got stainless steel cups and everything as well now.
It's funny. My household just watched that as well, and all the plastic has been replaced by glass.
Yeah, and how annoying is beeswax dental floss, mate? Bloody hell! But but at the moment, I'm bouncing through a few things. There's nothing really that stands out for what I'm watching. What I'm listening to, I will say, for the last 18 months, I cannot stop listening to Sleep Token. I don't know if you've heard of Sleep Token, but it's there's a group. I don't know where they're from. I originally saw them on a Chris Williamson podcast. He was wearing a Sleep Token t-shirt, and I downloaded their complete collection playlist on Spotify. And all of the writing, the doctrine, the SOPs, all of the stuff for the kind of system that I've been building in the last 18 months has been Sleep Token just in the background. It's a really, really good, really, really good group for deep thinking and some great songs.
I actually went to Chris Williamson, his live show in Sydney just 3 weeks ago.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. Well, mate, listen, you're a busy man. We've got a lot of stuff covered, mate. Thank you so much for joining me, mate. And as I said, I'll be in contact real soon. And the moment this new program's released, let me know and I'll put it on my socials. I'll let everyone know it's ready to go.
Mate, 100%. Yeah, thanks, mate. We might have to do this again, but I will say as well, just as a real quick, and it's definitely not a sales pitch because I don't care about the money. I care about making safer humans. The program, the professional side is that, and I've got a civilian side as well based around threat agility. So for the first time ever, children's program with an animation, Arlo the Owl, child psychology approved for 6 to 11-year-olds. This has been the most rewarding thing I've built because something I drew on a piece of paper is now a Disney-level animation with missions for the kids. I've got a teenagers program coming up for navigating everything, including the online environment, and an adults program for any adult out there. And it's not situational awareness. It's threat agility. It's rewiring your nervous system because it's a remembering. You were never, ever meant to walk in a public environment asleep. We've just been trained to forget, and I'm reconnecting you to that. Not a sales pitch. Email me anytime. I've got nothing but time to talk to people about it. But, mate, it's an absolute honor. Let's do it again. You're a great dude. Mate. Thank you for what you're doing for everybody out there. And, we'll stay in touch, mate.
Mate, till I speak to you next time.
Stay safe. And if you can't stay safe, stay dangerous.
Lucas Atkins, thanks, brother. Thanks for watching this one. Click one of the videos on the screen right now for more XLBrief content.